Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. Hello, Jim.
Hello, David.
There was a great big event this weekend. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, so GearFest. It happened. It's over with. It actually was oddly more soothing when it let down this year than it had been in the past. I sort of stuck to my thing from last year, which is I wasn't going to spend a buttload of money this year, but I spent some money. I did.
So what did you get from Gear?
Besides a guilty conscience, I was going to, here. Nothing's plugged in.
Okay.
I got this.
Okay.
Which is the Walrus Audio Fathom.
The Fathom.
Yep.
So that's a reverb, right?
It's a reverb. It has Hall plate and then like a shimmer verb, and I don't know what the L stands for. And then it has a parameter control called X, which allows you to dial in different things with each of the different modes. Okay. The Hall and the plate is what I bought it for. The shimmer is great. And I'm really happy with it. This thing has it's a spacey sounding verb pedal. If you hit the decay up past 9 o'clock and the dampen up past 9, I mean, it gets intensely out there. I guess you would consider this a modulated reverb. It has a modulation setting for high, medium, and low, and it's just a toggle switch. But the coolest part, and this is the thing that I didn't even realize when I bought it, it has a sustain button. And if you hit and hold this, it'll actually just sustain the reverb for a particular note or particular passage. And then you can hold it and it'll sustain it as long as you hold it. The cool thing.
That's cool.
So the cool thing is that's not just it, Jim. That's not all. So obviously, like a typical pedal, you hit the bypass switch, it goes on, right? If you hit the sustain pedal and the bypass pedal at the same time, and then take your foot off, they both shut off. So it's intelligent enough to know that when you hit this, you also hit this, and that the bypass shouldn't be held, which is cool because now you can use it to jump the reverb on, right? And dump it for that specific passage. This is going to become an important part of some of the things that I do, because I was like, oh, I can do that. And then immediately I was like, oh, now I can end songs with a huge reverb tail, and you can make it just go whacked out when you do it. It's brilliant. That's an incredibly smart piece of tech. And the pedal itself is well built. I do like the fact that they emboss their logo in the back, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. My lights are not picking this up. Actually, it'll probably be better because I'll color correct in post, and it won't look as it looks like a teal color. It's green. It's very green.
Okay.
So
it looks
my lights are yellow. And so I have the yellow gels in them, and that's because my room is very blue. And then in post, it makes it easier to get for me to get to a proper white balance. Anybody who was watching last week probably noticed my camera looked so much better than it usually does. And I bought cheapy $25 lights on Amazon, so it wasn't a crazy expenditure. I got this, and then back behind me, underneath the Kemper, you can't see it in that shot here. Underneath the Kemper is my Lone Star cab, which I got last week. That was not a GearFest purchase, but that came from Good Time Music because I want to support my local retailers. And then I got, which hasn't arrived yet, it's on back order, is the JHS Unicorn is coming. That's a unified pedal, analog, tap tempo, whole 9 yards on that. And I got those pedals for the same price for the GearFest deal, which at this point probably isn't something I should have to hide too much, but they were about $30 off each. Right, for a grand total of $60 savings. And then I got Easy Bass, Tune Track Easy Bass, and I got that for $70 off or something.
Wow.
No, $50 off. So I'm sitting pretty at about $110 saved. And then I actually got a one of the drum MIDI packs for Easy Drummer, and that was $5 savings. So on a $25 MIDI pack, right? It's not like anything to write home about. But yeah, no, it was good. It was worth it. I got some cool stuff, and I'll have plenty to play with if COVID stays on lockdown for any longer here. We're in phase 4 right now. Bars are open. I suspect, depending on how the case counts look and stuff, I might be back to playing open mics sometime in August. I'm sort of like hedging my bets on that because I'm like, well, do I really want to go out and spread disease because I want to play open mic? I mean, I gotta weigh my options. I obviously have some differing opinions and thoughts about that, but it is what it is. So I'm getting my board laid out down here. See, there's a method to my madness, Jim. You saw this before the show. This will be the finished board. King of Tone, Sunface. This is actually really heavy. Kingmaker. This is a compressor they got from Good Time Music. They make these. It is the Loving, Touching, Squeezing compressor. And then, of course, the Ethos Overdrive in my RC3 and the Waza tuner. Not in that order, of course.
So did you get the Waza tuner because you wanted the Waza tuner? Or did you get the Waza tuner because
Drew bypass switch.
Okay.
I want to be able to turn off the buffer if I need it. So right now, in fact, I was playing with this the other day. So right now, my Sunface won't play nice in the Kemper loop. Ideally, I would like to have my board going into the loop on the Kemper so that I can trigger and I can still use the wah built into the Kemper. That's probably not going to end up being the long-term solution. But so I was going to have the true bypass turned on when I plug into the Kemper and then adjust my fuzz face settings to match that, which it has a tunable buffer. There's a trim pod on the inside for adjusting the input gain. And I need to adjust mine. I haven't done it yet. I'm terrified of changing it. I'm going to have to put some nail polish or something. I might thank my wife for that, by the way. Put some nail polish or something on there so I can tell where the original setting was. But I'm going to have to do it because I was just playing with this the other day. The Sunface does sound better than the Kingmaker. Like when I put them next to one another, there's something about the Sunface that the Kingmaker doesn't do, and it's like a complexity thing. I think if you didn't have them on the same board, you would never know. But now that I know, it's like, really? Now I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm always going to know. But that's cool because I found another use for the Kingmaker, which is a rat. Right now, I have it programmed to be a rat in one position on the 3-way toggle, and I have never been a fan of the rat. I'm not even going to lie. The rat pedal always seemed kind of silly to me. And then I played my buddy Mike's, Mike Mara, show listener, and he had a good LM308 rat. I mean, that had to be. He doesn't know what transistor or whatever is in it, or not the transistor, but the IC chip. But I have a feeling it's an LM308. And it's way better than the production ones I played. Way better. Head and shoulders. And also because I think when I was trying rats out, like, that was before I bought, so years and years ago, I had the Electro Harmonics, the Metal Muff. And I was trying out rats when I bought the Metal Muff. And the reason I was trying out rats is because I had heard somewhere that, like, you could get Jeff Beck kind of blow-by-blow sounds out of a rat. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't played with one enough. I think they're actually a little bit too gainy for that. But you could get some pretty cool overdrives out of it, too. I was playing around with it, and I was just like, I got to get a rat. Well, I'm not going to buy a rat yet, for sure. I think the more likelihood is I'll build my own, just because it's a fun project, and, well, rat's a rat.
And they're simple. They're
not a crazy circuit to build, and a lot of people build them as a first pedal. I built other pedals, so this is not going to be a big deal, but I may build my own rat just to have one, and then at that point maybe the Kingmaker goes, or maybe the Kingmaker becomes something else. But so the interesting thing is when you're running with the buffer on the Sunface, it's actually sensitive to buffers on both ends of the pedal, but for whatever reason it's less sensitive to the buffer on the left side.
Right.
So I have found that if I use the buffer on the Boss, I think because I put some other buffers in front of it and it didn't seem to affect the sun face like in the same way at all. I think I can get away with, and I need to do a trial run. I think I can get away with putting in the effects loop on the Kemper. And if that's the case, then I can do all my switching with the Kemper, and I can have like preset pedals for each song or whatever. Like this is what I'm gonna use on this, or I can do the performance thing where I go and stomp on this board. Yeah, I'll have a giant floorboard setup going with the Kemper remote on one side and then this on the other. But this will suffice until the new Kemper drives come. And when the new Kemper drives come, hopefully I can get away with those and not have to have like this crazy board with extra drives on it. Though, granted, I still like having this because I still do it. Like, back there is my Mark 525. I still like plugging this thing in there. And I actually, so as an open mic rig, like self-contained with the Ethos overdrive on it, it's freaking great. I plugged it into my interface and I was just slaying. It sounded so good. And I was sitting there going, that's not even an amp. Like, it's just a preamp with a speaker simulator on it. It's filthy good. And I had it running into my PreSonus interface direct to my monitors, like nothing else going on. Literally monitoring it dry. Post reverb, I had my reverb after the preamp, so I was getting like a little bit of a wet sound. But even when I turned it off, like I remember the last time I did this, I was like, oh, it's really dry, and I don't like that sound. But then I turned the reverb off, and it still sounded good. And I kind of sat there for a minute. I go, did I really need this reverb? And then I thought to myself, I said, yeah, I did. But the thought did cross my mind for a moment. I was like, man, did you just make a $200 mistake or whatever? It's like, anyway. Jim, did you watch any of the Sweetwater coverage? Did you watch any of the stuff? I mean, it's all available on demand, so you can do that retroactively. But
yeah, I was watching a little bit of it. Because my kids had me running around. I got to travel because I'm switching jobs, as you know, next week. So as you guys listen to this, the following Monday, I'll be in South Carolina for a couple to 5 days, depending on what they asked me to do. So the kids had me running around. Dad, we're going to need this while you're gone. We're going to need that while you're gone. And one wants to go to one town and one wants to go to the other town. And so, but anyway, so I was doing that, and then my one son says to me, "I've never seen the ocean."
what?
Yeah, the one that lived here for the whole time has seen it. Obviously, he lived down here, but the other one lived in upstate New York. He's never seen the ocean. And I said, "Your mother
It's
never
not
took you?"
like it's miles from the ocean.
Yeah,
And you guys are, well, I guess you guys
I
haven't
said,
lived
"Well,
down there.
next time we go over this bridge, just look, because
That's the ocean, like, look down
And it is
there.
not-
See that? That's the ocean.
Have you ever seen the other side? It's because it goes that far.
It's hilarious.
But, yeah, it was pretty funny. So we're gonna make a trip down to the beach. We went to go down to the beach. The traffic this weekend was terrible. Of course, next week is 4th of July weekend, so I'm not going down that weekend. So it'll be a couple weeks. And I'm hoping to take him. I'm hoping the base opens their beach because that's more private. It's military only and military families. So, but anyway, so yeah, I caught some of it. Like you were saying about we were talking earlier. Billy Gibbons gave a thing on there, and I was saying to you, I said, yeah, he's kind of like the Gene Simmons of blues rock.
Yeah, because he was very much like, here, buy my hot sauce, buy my strings, and people were making comments about it in the chat too, like, really?
Yeah.
So
he's been like that, though. If anybody expected something different from him, it's because they haven't been a true fan of
yeah,
him.
I mean, he's been like that for at least 10
always.
years. At least 10 years.
So his family, do you know his background? So his dad,
very little.
yeah, his dad, his uncle, his grandfather were all in movies.
Okay.
They were producers and directors and stuff like that. So he grew up in the Hollywood scene, and for him, ZZ Top was just a passion project. It wasn't about making a living or anything.
Yeah,
So
because he was already pretty wealthy at that point. I mean, he'd been handed down money. Like more than likely, I'm not gonna speak for his situation, but it sounds like he had already pretty much had it made at that point.
Yeah, he came up in money, and he's been in a lot of things. He was on Bones. He played one of the characters' fathers on Bones.
Yeah, I remember
but
that.
even before that, he did stuff, and his thing with he was collecting cars even back in the what was it? Trace Hombres.
Yeah.
And Los Amigos or Tres Amigos or whatever it was. He did stuff like that back then because one of his cars was then featured in later the Eliminator and the Exterminator, whatever those albums that sound exactly the same. But
Exterminator.
Just making stuff up there.
That's hilarious. But no, I like it.
He's always been that way. He's always been the fluffy guitars. He's always taken, hey, somebody's going to give me something for free. Heck yeah. But you got to give him credit. He was, I mean, let's face it. He at least if you believe what he tells you, he did some roadie stuff for Hendrix.
He was actually in the Moving Sidewalks, which was a band that played with Hendrix. So whether he's a roadie or not, it's kind of sketchy.
Well,
he's on the same stage.
He helped move his amps. And stuff like that.
But he ended up with Hendrix's wah pedal somehow. So, I mean, he likely grifted that.
I'm sure. That's not unheard of in those types of situations. So, and it might be something Hendrix said. Yeah, whatever.
It's possible. He's like, I could just get another one.
Give him crap.
Yeah,
I just get another. Hey, what happened to that wah pedal? I don't know. Just get another one. Yeah, but it was a Hendrix. It was a Hendrix signature wah. Hendrix like, oh wow.
It's like shit. I didn't know.
Obviously that didn't happen, but that would be so funny.
I don't care. Maybe it wasn't even up there. Maybe I just imagined it. Maybe it was like all the acid and like no.
A guy like him probably had so many freaking wah pedals he didn't know what to do with.
Yeah, well, so he got one of the first ones from Manny's Music. Like they weren't super popular, and like he got turned onto it fast. Anything new guitar related, like he was into quick.
Yeah.
He had the first modulation effect, which was the Univide, like shortly after it came out. And he was very interested in that stuff. But anyway. At any rate, so last year, this marks the first anniversary. Actually, last week would have been the first anniversary of me buying the Kemper. It has been requested, and don't think I'm doing this because I'm being selfish or anything. It's actually been requested by one of our Patreon supporters that I do a little bit of talk and discussion about what the Kemper is and how the Kemper functions. So I asked people today in the group to start submitting questions for a Kemper FAQ. I was going to have Jim try to read through those and ask me the questions, but if there's anything we miss, we'll go back and we'll look through at the end. But I also promised John that I actually get the Kemper when we talk about one of the questions. So I'll go get it when we get to that question.
So I'll go ahead and start reading.
Yeah, sure.
So for the first question from Dan Kish, we'll hit this one. Can it be used as a recording interface? I kind of think the answer to that is yes.
No. It's not a recording interface. So, in the idea that what he's asking about is a USB recording interface. The idea that, so the Helix, and which when people first hear that, they're like, what? And then you explain why, and I think it sort of makes a little bit more sense. So when I bought it, that actually kind of ticked me off a little bit because I was like, why would you not allow direct USB out? I knew this at GearFest when I bought it. I bought SPDIF cables to go with it. I bought an interface that had SPDIF on it, which I curse at regularly. That's the interface that's powering the show right now. So SPDIF, right? It's an older protocol. Why would they choose that? Well, the Kemper is 9 years old, folks, and that's going to get into the next question. But the Kemper is like 9 years old. Okay. So when the Kemper was created, the ADAT connections did exist, but they were not popularly used to have these big like extension pieces to your interface. And they didn't use to like a UAD, it had two physical inputs on it, and then it has the two, one or two ADAT inputs. And now they say it's like a 10N or a 10-in or a 12-in interface or a 24-in interface. No. It does not have 24 inputs. It has 24 channels available if you plug in external hardware via the ADAT connection. So The Kemper comes out pre-ADAT, so they use SPDIF. It's basically the same thing. It's a digital audio input format, and it uses clock, signal, and all this other stuff to make it work, so it syncs up to your existing card, which is nice, and I'll explain why in a moment, rather than USB. So everybody thinks that when they hear, like, the Helix can be used as a recording interface, the Fractal can be used as a recording interface, everybody loses their mind, thinks, I don't have to buy gear to record with. Wrong. So here's the problem. How are you going to connect your studio monitors to your computer? Are you going to connect them through your audio interface, which is then your Helix or your Fractal? Now, both the Helix and the Fractal do have extra inputs, but this means I actually have to take the Helix and Fractal and put it somewhere in my space where these cables are readily going to be available. And when I go to a gig, I'm going to have to unhook it and leave these cables dangling for my dog or my cat to chew up, you know. It's not a good idea. I honestly don't think there's a whole lot of people that would be like, that's a tremendous value. It is nice to have it, which the funny part is the Kemper actually does have the outputs for it. It has a USB-A and a USB-B connector on the back of it. So it could be male or female, depending on what you need. And the ports are fully functional, except they didn't route audio through the USB port, right? So that was a conscious decision by Kemper. They had it available to them, and they chose not to. And here's why. They never envisioned that the Kemper would end up in, like, what I would call prosumer hands because of its price tag. So their assumption was this would end up in studios, people that had, like, a lot of gear money built up and invested, right? And so they figured in a studio environment, you'd use the SPDIF connection to connect to the board or to the audio interface and get your sounds out of the DAW that way. Or in a lower budget scenario, you'd use XLR cables, which are fine. Actually, I would even argue that you would want to use XLR outs on this guy because you want quality preamps taking the signal out of the Kemper into your DAW. And it makes a world of difference, right? Now, like, the PreSonus obviously doesn't have quality preamps, so I'm totally cool using SPDIF for that. But I know I'm going to get hate mail for that. I just don't think the PreSonus pre's sound that great. They're a big fat sounding thing, but they don't have any of the delicateness that you would find in, like, a 1073, which you can't even get a hold of for under $1,000 a piece. You know, even something like the UAD systems or Audient puts out some pretty stellar pre's at the same price point. But the idea is that you would want to put it into something that is going to give you better signal quality and actually sweeten the sound and do some stuff to it rather than just, you know, huck it out via XLR. That being said, the in and out on this thing is extremely flexible. I would actually say it's probably more flexible and more well thought out on the output side specifically than, like, say, the HX Stomp or even the Helix, because it has. So the Helix is really flexible, and that's a hard thing to say. So I probably am cutting myself short on that one, but it's flexible and it's smart and it's well engineered. Not having USB wasn't a deal breaker for me. It will be for some folks, I'm sure. But it's just, you know, when you're buying a product, I think Jeff said it in the group, and he's kind of right. When you're buying a product that costs $2,200 for, you know, the entry level with the remote, what's the extra $200 for a stereo interface with XLR plugs? I mean, the idea that you're going to plug your monitors into the Kemper and monitor your entire DAW through your Kemper seems kind of silly to me. So
we're using, for the SPDIF, you're using a TOS link?
It's just SPDIF. It's actually over RCA.
Okay,
they're not RCA. They're coax, whatever you call them. But anyway, that's another interesting thing I was thinking. So, like, if you could theoretically do what they call port aggregation, which is not really port aggregation on an audio device, and have your DAW, like, negotiate a compatible rate, like a clock speed for both interfaces, which in this case would allow you to run the outputs of your interface, the inputs of the Kemper. I have not had good experience doing this. I've actually had abysmal experiences doing this, and talking with other people, that's been a problem too, even now. And there's a driver set called ACO for All, which is supposed to take your ACO stuff and make it talk nice. I think ACO for all is a scam, and well, it's not a scam. It doesn't cost anything, right? It's about somebody actually told me it's about as good as what it costs, which is it's good for nothing. And that's because it adds a lot of latency to use ACO for all, and so I wouldn't recommend it. If you're doing home studio stuff, maybe you can get away with it, but I would highly recommend you get an interface where you can actually do real-time monitoring and use that. Actually, don't even monitor out of your DAW if you can, and you'll have a much better experience with the Kemper. But that answers a couple of questions there, I think.
Okay, I'm going to skip over one. We can come back to it on purpose because it's a long one.
Okay.
So someone said the head, black version only, is available with a built-in Class D power amp.
That's correct.
It produces 600 watts, 8 ohms, or 300 watts, 16 ohms.
And let me pull up the manual while I'm talking to you. Go ahead.
Yep. And the question is, what is the suggested cabinet and speakers to handle that? I suggest just don't turn it up to 11.
Okay. So this was my initial fear with the Kemper, right? Like I would buy the powered one, and I only had a 1x12 cab with a V30 in it. So I got like 80 watts of power handling or something. So in the manual, they tell you it's actually rated for 4, 8, or 16 ohm guitar cabinets. I'm running 4 ohms right now a lot of times. I'm running my V30 and my C90 cab. So I got a Lone Star cab and the rectifier cab that's underneath the Mark V. And I run them at 4 ohms. So what this does, if you run a cabinet, and I try to briefly go through this, but if you run a cab at 4 ohms, you're actually doubling the wattage that goes through the speakers. So you can do that. And a lot of people say, like, it's dangerous, you don't want to do that. Listen, most people will tell you, you can get away with it. You just got to make sure you don't put too much wattage to the speaker, because that's actually what will burn it. Okay, this will cause your voice coil to melt, or you'll blow the speaker. Basically the same thing. So in order to not damage the speaker, and I think there's some risk to power output transformers and guitar amps doing this as well, but I think it's more of a risk of blowing the speaker. Honestly, I don't think it can handle it. So 4 ohms, if I'm running 600 watts and it doubles the wattage output, if I'm running at 4 ohms, I'm running 1,200 watts out of the Kemper. Which, you know, we think about wattage in terms of volume. That's a loud freaking thing, and it is loud. So like a 1/4 watt, I can't be in the room with it very easily in this condo, because my neighbors upstairs will start getting mad. So I run, when I'm running that, I'm running like real low on the Kemper. The Kemper has output monitoring on it now, which is a new feature, which will actually tell you how much wattage it's putting out. And it'll help you keep you from blowing your stuff up. But in general, I mean, people were using this thing for 8 years before that ever even appeared. So some people, yeah, if you ask around a forum, some people, yeah, I blew up a cab or whatever. And I gotta say, I mean, if you blew up the cab, chances are you were not being sensible with the Kemper, and or the speakers had something wrong with them to begin with. And when you put max volume through them, which you'd never done with a tube amp or whatever conventional amplification you had, that's what actually caused it. That I would speculate that. I've been running that V30 pretty hard for about a year with Kemper, and haven't really had any problems with it. I don't push tons of volume through that cabinet because I am sensible. But if you've ever played like a 50 watt amp through a 25 watt speaker, you can tell when that speaker is going to give up the ghost. Like, it's pretty noticeable. So I would caution that part of it. Like, just be aware that, you know, if the speaker sounds funky, if it sounds like it's distorting and it's like starting to melt, you'll hear it. You'll know. And actually, Kemper themselves had said the same thing, which is like, if you notice the speaker is not sounding correct, turn it down. But granted, I mean, I've done profiles and matched the volumes of both amps. I actually felt like it was harder to get the volume up on the Kemper than it was on the real amp. And I think part of that's because I don't think they're actually using all 600 watts as like pure power output. I think what they're actually doing is limiting it. So in a real amplifier, in like a Class D amplifier situation, when it distorts, it sounds awful. Right. So what they often will do is say an amplifier is 100 Class D watts, and what that really means is it's 300 Class D watts, so that you never get into that power output distortion, and it's just clean power, and it's limited, so the volume knob it'll never even get to where you can use all 600 watts. I think in the Kemper you can actually put out 600 watts, but in order to do it, there's what they call the power boost feature, which is you have to turn it on, and it's on the screen with the output volume. You have to turn it on, and then of course you get more volume, right? And I think it goes up to, it's like 0 to 12. So I'm assuming it's dB, but I don't know for sure. 12 dB would be like 3 times the power. So that would kind of match up. 3 is double the power. 9 is, is triple the power. So 12 would logically be, kind of in that triple the power zone. Yeah, but that's it. Is there anything else about the Kemper volume and nope. Ohm rating? I mean, I think you're safe. I don't think there is like an expected speaker output solution. Of course, you can do the Kemper cab. I don't even think the Kemper cab is rated for the full 600 watts, and that's just because they didn't need it. And that's a whole other like conversation. But I think there's a question about the Kemper cab. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I know enough from other people's conversations to probably answer the question.
Okay, so in 100 words or less.
I was given more in the comments.
I
couldn't tie my shoe with 100 words.
In 100, yeah, exactly. In 100 words or less, at a high level. So don't go wading the weeds on this one. Explain the process of creating a profile.
So it's kind of heavy, but I will do my best to do that here. So you have a direct output, send, this guy, and you have, I'm looking for the return input with an XLR, right? So this goes out to your amp on the front end. Yep. This goes to your microphone. You put your microphone in front of the amp. You get it sounding the way you want. This thing actually allows you to monitor through headphones in the front, which is actually why it has a headphone port, to help you get your microphone where you want it. You can put it in another room if you want. You can do all that sorts of stuff. And then basically when you're ready to profile, there's on the chicken head knob that's on the front here. Try to get it so I can hold it.
Yep. There's a profile button.
You go down to profiler, and then basically you hit go. There's a couple of questions it asks you. It's like a wizard, right? You hit go, and it sends test signals out from the send into the amplifier, and then they get picked up by the microphone, which is why the microphone is part of the profile. And then they come back into the Kemper, and the Kemper makes the profile from that. So it's not super complicated. Obviously, you need to know what an amp should sound like. I would recommend, if you're going to do it, put your Kemper in another room so you can monitor the amp turned up, and make sure you get your mic placement right. Spend some time doing the mic placement. Spend some time twisting the knobs on your actual amp. And then when you're ready to rock and roll, you'll have a facsimile. I've experimented with 2 mics for doing profiles. You gotta know your shit if you're gonna do that. I mean, you really need to know about phase relationships, and you need to have the proper gear to aggregate those mics back into the Kemper. So you need like a mixer, and you need to pan both things because it doesn't do a stereo profile. It's a mono profile. So you'd have to use some way to sum those, like in a mixer, and then put everything on the left send, and then send it out to the amp. And I've done that. It works. My problem was my mics were out of phase, so those profiles are terrible. When I used the cabinet modeling inside the Kemper. So the Kemper can separate. This is where the voodoo magic happens, right? This isn't part of the profiling process per se, but this is part of how the Kemper works. So like, this is a common question we probably should answer. I don't think anybody actually asked this one. So the Kemper actually has voodoo magic in it. Okay. I don't know how this works. It's not straight EQ. I can tell you that right now, but basically you can press a button on the Kemper and it knows what to actually extract from your amplifier signal coming back in as a mic'd profile to eliminate the microphone and eliminate the speaker with varying degrees of success. I would say 85% on the worst case scenario, 95 to 97% on best case scenario, it can eliminate your cabinet from the sound. I think if you use a straight up SM57, about an inch off the cone, the center of the cone, you're going to get really good results when you turn the cab off, and it's going to sound like a direct profile. There is also now the ability to make a direct profile, which is instead of running a microphone, you use, because you saw there was a TRS jack on the back that's next to where that XLR connector is at. You can actually use that, I think. And the way it works is you put it through a direct box. So you get a direct signal from the power output of your amp. You plug it into the Kemper, and now you've got a profile of the direct sound of the amp. I've been using direct profiles when I'm using my cabinets, and they sound better because they, in most cases, if you have a profile that doesn't work quite right when you turn the cabinet modeling off, a direct profile will solve that problem. Most of your commercially available profiles now are coming with a direct option. They might do 3 or 4 profiles that are really good for direct. And then you have the last. So studio profile is the conventional way you do it, right, with the cabinet. And then you have direct, and then you have merged. And so what merged profile means is you make both profiles, right, with a cabinet and then with a direct box, and you combine them so that it can correctly remove the cabinet, and it makes everything a little bit better. Now, I've had varying degrees of success playing with merged profiles. I think studio profiles are probably my favorite. But I see why they did the merged profile, which is like we want to eliminate that extra, 10% of problems that can occur with the cab defeat. I don't see a ton of merged profiles for sale. They are out there, but like Tone Junkie, for example, doesn't make a big deal about doing merged profiles, and that's because I think he's sort of in the school where I am. It's like you buy the Kemper for studio profiles. I mean, if you are going to run a cab with it, like if you buy a pack with 32 models of the same amp, 32 profiles of the same amp, you're going to find one that works for you. You're going to turn off the cab model, and you're going to be happy if you plug it into a cabinet. So,
yep. Well, again, you'll use it either in a direct studio environment, or you're going to use it on stage. Mm-hmm. In a direct environment.
Yeah, and that was another raging part of that conversation I was having with John when he asked that question. Was like, I had a side conversation that I want to share before we move on to the last couple questions. But I reached out to him and I said, if you got other questions about this, like I'm happy to answer them. He is a leading Patreon supporter, and I always take care of our Patreon supporters. I reached out to him and I said, hey, what are you thinking? And he basically said, well, I was thinking about the powered Kemper, and I said, well, honestly, if I was going to do it, I probably wouldn't buy a powered Kemper. Even now, like I'm kind of the point where like I don't use the power amp enough. I like having it. Is it a $500 feature? I mean, if I had to pay full price for the Kemper, I didn't pay full price for it. I probably wouldn't do it. Only because I would have done, and I told him, I said, in retrospect, I would have bought a pair of QSC monitors, like nice ones, and just use those for monitoring on stage. And then when I needed the extra volume, I can turn one of them around and face the audience or whatever I got to do. But the reality is I don't really need extra volume. Most of the places I play have beyond adequate PAs. Old Stumpy's PA is not the greatest. I do use a cab to monitor Old Stumpy. I have to be really careful about how loud I am because there's acoustic guitars and stuff there, and so I having a little bit extra control of my monitor. I think the next time I play out, I might just take the Kemper and my wedge and see how that goes. But I mean, that's really the only reason you buy the power thing is if you have to have a cabinet on stage. You feel like I really want to have a cabinet, you buy the power one. Otherwise, get a Seymour Duncan power stage, get a QSC. Whatever you got to do to get the amplification situation that you need and that you're comfortable with. But I don't think there's necessarily a reason to buy the powered one anymore. I mean, there was a time like when, it was really convenient to have an ICE power amp, an ICE power amp inside the Kemper, and but now you can buy commercially available ones for like peanuts. And they're convenient. If you don't need to take it, it's just a little bit extra weight. I think it actually adds about 2 pounds to the Kemper's weight, if I remember correctly, because I did all the weight calculations and stuff for air travel when I bought mine. Yeah, so there's that, and of course, one more thing to break, right? So if you're not going to use the power amp, don't buy one. Save your money. Buy one used. Used Kemper profilers, like the toaster right now, are going for like way under what they should be going for because the stage has cannibalized them. So if you're going to buy one, if you're on the fence and you want to try one out, the toaster is reasonably priced right now.
Okay. So that was a little more than 100 words.
Oh, the question was answered way over 1,000 words, but the last little bit was like another tangent. I don't count that.
Okay, so the last question, the way I understand a profile, it is like a moment in time or a reflection of a particular amp mic'd a particular way, with the amp set a particular way in a particular room. I don't know how particular that is. Anyway, we got to buy John Bott a thesaurus. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, once I have a profile, I can tweak it many ways with the onboard controls, true or false.
Okay. I laughed and I said I can answer that one in one word, and I would say true.
Yes.
But I would also say misleading, because so yeah, it's a copy of the amplifier and the microphone and the cable and anything else you put in the signal path between the Kemper and the Kemper outputs, like in that loop. Because that's what it is. It's a loop. In fact, you can use that as an effects loop in the Kemper, which is wild. So it is absolutely true that it's a moment in time. The way that the amp is set up, it makes a copy of the profile. It adds post amp EQ, but the EQ inside the Kemper is not meant to mimic the amp's controls. It can't measure the controls. In order for you to do that, you would actually have to turn the controls, and it would have to take multiple tests. And you could see how the profiling process could take hours if you had to, like, picture a Mesa Boogie with like extra knobs, and you're like, oh God, I gotta turn the presence knob, and like they want me to tweak it like 1/10 of a turn or something. You could see where that would get like sketchy and crazy.
Right.
Actually, I think you could probably do it by saying, put it at noon, put it all the way up, put it at 0, put it at noon, put it all the way up. But it's a whole thing, and like they don't go through the shenanigans. Plus, when you got interactive controls, that makes it even more nightmarish. Like, have you ever had an amp where you push the treble and then the bass in the middle do nothing? That's what interactive is. You'd have to cycle through all the possible permutations. It's just not. It's not feasible.
And, right. That not all amps are the volume and the bass and the treble and the mid.
Right.
Like, there are some amps, I don't even know why some of that's on there. I honestly, like,
Yeah,
that.
like the Marshall Plexis, like it should just be volume knobs and that's it, because the tone knobs don't do anything, unless the amp is like at 1, which nobody ever uses them at 1.
Yeah. And there's a point in my Marshall where that just became useless. And
yeah, and it's just that's the Marshall thing. That's like that tone stack, So,
and of course that depends on where what I'm doing clean, or when I'm crunching, or when I'm using the, and it's all different. My tone controls are different based on that, and it's based, and like I said, sometimes it just goes away. It's just useless.
Most of the control, like the tone controls for the tone stack, bass, middle, treble, presence, those controls on the Kemper, I'm almost never touching. If I don't like the way they're set in the profile, I switch to another profile. Right. And usually the profiles are diverse enough, or they're just gain staged, and they're already really set pretty well anyway. The reputable ones are usually pretty good. And when I can't find the one I want, then I go buy another pack, or I download, off the rig manager and find what I'm looking for. I think the assumption a lot of people make when they're getting the Kemper is like, this amp I really like doesn't sound like this other amp that's based on it. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, so for example, I have profiles of the HXDA from PRS. The HXDA is a 1959 Super Lead Plexi, the model number, not the year. It's a 68, and I think one of them's like a 71. So it's got, you know, Dwayne Allman and Hendrix. That's what HXDA stands for. They both use the same amp or something. Or no, they both use the same circuit, but like different style or whatever. And so it has a switchable thing to go from the Hendrix mode
to Dwayne Allman. Yeah.
So the funny thing is, I have like 68 Plexi profiles as well, and they sound a lot alike. And really the distinction is like the cabinet, number one, but it's kind of like, okay, so if I'm after that sound and I don't like the profiles of this amp and I need a 68 Plexi sound, just go get another one. Like, there's a million amps that are based on 68 Plexis. That's not a new thing. And you can get super specific. Like, obviously Mesa Boogie makes unique amplifiers. The Triple Crown is not something you're going to find like everybody makes a copy of. But there's enough people making profiles. You got options. I have 2 sets of Triple Crown profiles. There's at least 3 others. So when you put it in perspective, like, I'm going to find something I like. I might have to spend a little bit more money because I keep buying packs, you know. But they're out there. The other thing is you can move that tone stack, which is usually post-amp. By default, when you profile an amp, it's post-amp. You can actually move it pre-amp. So you can kind of mimic the similar kind of effects of a tone stack prior to the amp. So like if you want to roll off your bass before the guitar hits the amp. There's 2 types of tone stacks in existence, right? Like there's pre-amp tone stack and then post-amp tone stack. And it's not really pre-amp, post-amp. It's like first gain stage, and then like post first gain stage or post gain stage, which is basically like, it acts more like an active EQ when it's post, but it's really not boosting anything. And then you can get into active EQs, which if you've ever played with an amp that has an active EQ, they're wild because the EQ is so versatile. You will be like lost if you've only been a passive guy. So like Marshall's a perfect passive example, right? Once you get enough volume going, Marshall tone stack falls apart. What the Marshall tone stack is actually doing is it's controlling like the input of your guitar before it hits the first gain stage, which is why at some point they don't mean anything because you've just saturated the gain stage no matter what. You know what I mean? Fenders are that way. I don't know if Marshalls are. I'm pretty sure Marshalls are pre as well. But now I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking, no, that's probably not the case. I think they are post, but they're just ineffective. But in like Fender amps, your bass and treble controls are supposed to be prior to the first gain stage. And so like, in the Mesa Mark V, and Mark series of amps, the preamp controls are pre. And the way you can tell this, if you turn them all to 0, no volume goes through. So you open up your treble and it's basically like a treble it's basically controlling how much treble gets through to the first tube. That's essentially how it works. And so you can control the saturation by doing that, because if you think of each control as a gain control, like I want to saturate the mids, turn the mids up, right? Makes sense. And of course then you got into your whole like acoustic science things where bass has more energy, so it saturates more fast, and like it can get woolly and nasty because it saturates faster, and it saps your ability to saturate your treble and middle controls if you do that. So you have to be sort of specific and understand how the amp is layered. The other thing that plays into those kind of tone stacks is whether, you know, one control is feeding another. You can kind of emulate that on the Kemper by putting the tone controls pre-amp, but it's not going to be quite the same because you're not controlling that first level of saturation. It's like, think of it like having a 10-band EQ before the amp, right? Everybody's familiar with the Boss GE7, I would assume at this point, which is a little graphic EQ pedal. It's like that. And then, of course, when you have it post-amp, it's like that. You have a Boss GE7 after the amp, except it's really it's a bass, middle, treble, presence, tone stack instead of a 7-band EQ. So if you really are anal about tone, I mean, that's why I see people still like either using amps or going to Fractal or going to Helix, because they emulate the tone controls. Now, it's subjective how well they do that, of course, but they do that, right? So I would argue that the Helix doesn't do a tremendous job of it. I think there's some definitely some shortcomings that I've noticed in the way that their tone controls work on some of their models, but I would say that if you're really, really picky about your tone controls on an amplifier, don't get a Kemper, because you're really gonna have problems finding the right profile if you have some super specific things you do. So like, I know people that turn their bass off on every amp they plug into, and if you're doing that, I don't know how you're gonna emulate that in the Kemper, because that's like a super specific thing you can do. You're gonna have a hard time finding profiles that do exactly that. However, there is still
make your own.
Right, if you're going to make your own, if you already have the amp or you have access to the amp, the Kemper's perfect tool for that, because then you can make a copy of all the crappy amps you want with the bass rolled completely down and carry that around with you. You know, that's really the strength of the Kemper, is that I can do that. I can take this amp that essentially sounds like trash, and I can have my trash. Whereas you can't do that with a Helix. Like, you can use line 6's trash, and you can trash it in the way that you are comfortable with, but you can't take your trash with you. It's somebody else's trash that you've made sound trashy. Trash. I'd like to say trash.
Trash.
I live in a
the
trash
word trash
can.
comes up a lot.
All right, so there was one more question, slightly inflammatory, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one out.
No, I wanna.
No, come on. It's not something you could answer anyway.
Jim, do it. It's talking about the aesthetics, right?
Yeah. How much time was spent on aesthetics? Couldn't have been more than 0 time at all.
All right. I'm not the designer of the amp. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like...
I actually like the aesthetic.
I like the Kemper. I like the way it looks.
I'm not going to say anything.
I like the way it looks. But here's the funny part people don't realize. So the Kemper...
It's very logical design.
Yes. This is what people don't understand. This is the input, right?
Yeah.
And if
how about that? Left to right.
If I'm using the amp, I hold this down, and it brings up all the input settings on the display. So if you'll notice the way that the layout is, all of the settings are down here. You have system settings, which wrap around all of these settings, right? So if you start to think about the coloring on this is logical. This is laid out the way you would expect something to be. You have soft knobs, so they're all indicated on the bottom of the display when it's up, what they do. You have pages, which this is the only thing I kind of don't like. So you can scroll through more parameters using the pages button. And there's an indicator on screen when there are more pages available, obviously. So input, then you have your stomps. So these are your preamp effects, your amp section, and then your post effects, like reverb and delay and all that stuff. And you can put stomps in the post, and you can put post in the stomps. So it's not like they're, set in stone. And then you have the output section, right? And that's it. Like, this is not a complicated design. I know people panic when they see it, because it's like, oh, I've got these selector buttons, and I've got undo and redo functionality, which all of that stuff you're going to use. You're going to use copy-paste. You're going to use copy-paste a lot in the Kemper, because you're going to be like, why would I want to change the settings on that? I'll just copy it and then move it from one profile to another. It's easy. And and everything is preset. So, like, let's say I have a particular preamp setup that I like. I can hit this button, hold it, and I can store that, name it as a preset, and I can deploy it across other profiles. And if I put this thing in performance mode, I have the setup to have like 5 different amps for like, chorus, bridge, intro, verse. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that it hadn't been done that way yet. And the best part about it is when you do the performance mode, so you got 5 profiles that you can deploy, and then you can go in there and make it. They have a thing called morphing. So what morphing is kind of their answer to snapshots. So you already have basically what is 5 snapshots, right? But you can change everything in those snapshots, including the amp model, which is wild because you can't do that in line 6. But then on top of that, when you're in the there's actually a software limitation to that, which may also be a hardware limitation, and that's why there's actually a delay between switching presets on the Helix
line 6,
because the amp model takes up so much processing power on the existing chip that it actually has to load it through RAM, which is why it takes a second. This guy, it preloads all that. So that's why you can do 5 amps in a performance. It has enough to hold 5 models, basically. And so then what you do, use the morphing function. If you hit the selector switch for that channel, for that part of the performance, it'll actually change parameters on the effects that are on that patch. So like, let's say I want to make my delay and reverb much bigger for this section of the song. Hit it. Now you got bigger delay and reverb. Yeah, and or I want my gain control to go up, and it's not like it just instantly changes either. It actually morphs into it slowly, and that's actually a configurable option, like how long it takes. Or you can use an expression pedal, so which means that you can go from clean to dirty if you want, with an expression pedal, and have everything else on the device change. And because all of the effects, almost all of them, not all of them do, but most of them do, have a mix knob that goes from 0 to 100%. You can turn things on and off, enable everything, use the morph to fade them in, which is wildly useful. If you can't think of things that you would do with that, I promise you that if you play with this thing, you'll be like, how will I be able to go back to a conventional rig? Because you'll be like, those things are like invaluable. It's wild that they've like introduced things that are not typically things you can actually do, and made them so easy that you're like, I don't think I can use another device until they can emulate those same features.
Okay, now we're done with it.
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on. I don't think there's anything else to talk about. The aesthetic design. Okay, so just to answer the question, that's a totally subjective thing. Like, obviously, people don't like the fact that it doesn't look like an amp. I'm gonna posit something, and it's gonna be heresy, right? But I don't think amps look that good anyway. Like, in general, they're kind of utilitarian designs. This whole idea that like a conventional, like a Marshall, somehow looks cool, dude. It's a box with a gold thing across it. And they're either black, white, silver, red, or purple. Yeah, it's like,
if you look at the functionality of it, we've got to fit X number of these into a box shaped container. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, let's shape them like little boxes, just like you would with a U-Haul. And that way you can stick them in the bigger box, which is your U-Haul type truck, or,
if you can't stand the toaster, get the rack.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I mean,
so,
and you can also, so Zilla Cabs makes a head shell for it. They make a head shell for it. I think it's the most ridiculous thing on earth. Why would you buy a head shell for something that's already provided to you? But it's available if you want it. Like, if you want to buy a bunch of crap for your Kemper you don't need, like I do all the time, you can get that.
Yeah, there's a guy, Chris something or other, that makes all kinds of cool stuff for those. He does it for Helix, and he does.
You mean Chad Boston?
Chad Boston, thank you, Chad.
There are other people too, but
he does it. Yeah, he's got a little company that does these things.
Yeah, he sells things for a lot of money that cost very little money to make.
Yeah, but hey, that's his shtick, and
people are buying it, so it must be cool. I don't know.
Why not?
Not my thing.
The Pet Rock cost nothing, and it sold for a lot when I was a kid.
Sure.
All right, so I want to shift gears. I'm going to shift gears twice. So first shift of gears, as we spoke about before the show.
Don't tell anybody about that.
I'm not going to talk anybody. I'm not going to give any specifics. I want to go into a generalization of it. So right now I'm looking at something that I may purchase. And it's a used item, and there's a reason I'm not mentioning it, is because I don't want anybody to buy it. So I am just going to say that Robert Jackson knows what it is. And the reason I mention Robert Jackson is because, so I want to talk about a little bit about when you're buying used gear, right? I'm buying this item because it's nostalgic for me. And I said to Robert Jackson, I said, look, I want you to take the nostalgia factor away from me. I want you, and that's what you do. You get an objective person to come in, right? I want you, just like you would with a car, just like you would with anything, you take a look at this. Tell me what you would offer this person. Because if that's where I would go. And he told me straight up, he said, I'd offer him what he's asking. So it's worth every penny of it. So now I'm sad because I was hoping that he would say, "No, you're letting nostalgia run away with you. It's worth half the price." He didn't. But at least I got, and I wanted to say that because I got that.
You got an accurate price estimate. You know what it's going to cost you.
Right. And hopefully it'll be available in a couple weeks and I can go get it.
Yeah.
I hope. I could always give the guy money, but I don't want to give the guy money.
Man, then
say,
not,
"Hey,"
yeah.
Yeah, then I don't buy it, and then
Or give him a post-dated check and be like, "Yeah, you can cash this when it's good, and I'll come pick it up."
Then I'll come get it. So, okay, shifting gears real fast again. So that was just a piece of recommendation for me to the people who may be looking to buy stuff in the future. That is, that. So now shifting gears again. There's two pieces of gear. I shouldn't say two pieces. Two lines of gear that Fender has released recently, and one is this Squire Paranormal series. We haven't talked about it yet. So there's 6 paranormal Squiers. 4 of which they're not my thing. I'm not an offset guy, and the offset Telecaster to me just looks like, hey, look, we put tele pickups in a Jazzmaster or a Mustang, one of the two.
I'm just kind of bored with this.
The Toronado doesn't look like anything that.
Well, the Tornado's a big deal because people have been wanting that guitar to return for a while.
Yeah, but that's the Toronado. That's not an alternate universe thing. That is a Toronado. That's what it was. So it doesn't look any different. I'm not saying it's a bad guitar.
I didn't know these were alternate universe. I thought this was the Paranormal series.
Paranormal. That's what they're called.
Right, but that's not alternate universe. It's just paranormal.
No, paranormal.
Right.
And then, I'm sorry, did I say alternate universe after that?
Yeah.
And then the paranormal supersonic just looks like hot garbage to me.
It looks like a Tornado upside down to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's literally what it is.
Yeah. The Tornadoes are okay. Let's
make some left-handed Tornadoes.
And then call it at least
and
that
then put a right-handed neck on it.
Yeah,
no, they put a left-handed. They put a left-handed neck on it. They actually put a left-handed. This is ridiculous. So if you want a left-handed Tornado, you have to buy the Paranormal Supersonic and use an upside-down vibrato.
I was gonna say just get an upside-down vibrato. Use the Supersonic. You're done. So then there's a Cyclone. That's the other one that it's kind of it's got what is that? The Duosonic look to it.
It actually was. Yeah, so the Cyclone was popular around the same time as the Tornado.
Yeah, Jazzmaster-esque controls.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, not really paranormal to me. Just they've done it before, and it's cool. It's got a coolness factor.
These guitars are real popular with like a certain set of people, and they have a nostalgia factor, Jim. So like, with my generation, so I grew up and these guitars were a thing. You could find them. There you go. And I know somebody in particular who listens to the show off and on, who's a big fan of the Tornado. He used to own one, used to gig with one. And I could never get into those guitars. I like the way they look. I actually like the way offsets look, but I've never found one that I felt like actually fit me as a player.
Yeah, me too.
But these are parts grab bag guitars. Like I hadn't even seen this series until you brought it up, Jim. I'm glad you brought this up. These are parts. These are again. I have extra strat necks and extra tele necks, and we'll just throw them on an offset body and sell them.
Yeah. It looks to me like the Paranormal offset Telecaster is a Telecaster version of the Tornado. I think that's
I like that design better when it comes from Reverend.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just it. Reverend's been doing this and doing it well for a while.
Yeah, so actually I want to point out something. So my comment a second ago, I want to make a correction. I said this is like they're taking these guitars and parts and then putting them together like Lego bricks and reselling them. I don't mean that they have extra necks laying around. I mean that that's the design philosophy here. Like, oh, well, we could make a new guitar by just taking this neck and putting it on this body. Look, people crucified Gibson for coming out with a new design in that Gibson Modern or whatever, you know what I'm talking about, the new one they came out with a couple years ago, and people are like, oh, it looks like a PRS. But they did something different.
Yeah.
This is literally the company just saying, well, we make Lego bricks anyway.
Yeah.
And I actually feel kind of insulted when a company does this because, yeah, okay, so some people want to buy a pre-modded guitar, but if you're the modders guitar company, just sell the parts. Like, let people mod their own. Just sell the parts. Like, Lego figured it out. They opened the Lego store. You can go in there and you can buy a bucket of bricks, or you can buy a bag of the specific stuff you want. Fender, get a clue.
Yep. So now, of all these guitars that they did put out, the two that interest me, and one that interests me the most, and you probably have to jump on it fast, because when they put these out before, they didn't last long. So I'll mention the one, and then I'll mention the one that I'm thinking I'm going to have to jump on as soon as they start showing up. The Paranormal Cabronita Telecaster thin line. That one's kind of cool. P90s in the thin line Telecaster. That one's kind of got a coolness vibe. But the one that really struck me, and I'm like, that one's probably going to have to be jumped on, because for some reason, these Squire baritones, they go out like that.
Yeah, because everybody wants a
baritone
baritone guitar, and Squire is the perfect place to do it because nobody wants to commit to spending like $1,000 for a good baritone. So they buy the Squire equivalent, which is like, the budget baritone.
Right.
Which is another funny thing, because the first baritone I can remember Fender doing was that Telecaster. So like the
that's what this
Swamp
is.
Thing Telecaster or whatever.
Yeah.
And that guitar came out. I played it one time. I saw it one time. They discontinued it like almost immediately. And I've been told it didn't take off, but that thing's got cult status, because I know people who are like looking for them all the time.
That's just it, though. For that one or two songs, you want a baritone to play. That it makes perfect sense to have a budget guitar you can drag out to play that couple of songs with a baritone.
For $400, it's worth it.
That's what I'm saying. For $400, these are gonna fly out.
Yeah, I think so too.
They'll be gone fast. Anything
honestly, Strat or Telly they do is always a hit anyway.
Yeah,
so,
the Paranormal are gonna fly out. They're the coolness factor. We usually go when weird.
It's not for me, but obviously there's a market for this because I keep doing it.
Yeah, these things, all except for the supersonic one. That one just looks kind of.
Yeah.
But to me, this is going to be a hot thing. If you can find one, get it.
I wonder if the supersonic is supposed to be kind of like the Jag Sting kind of look.
Yeah.
Because they really don't want to reissue the Jag Sting. Like, that's been a whole thing.
Yep.
That's a guitar that goes for way more than it did new. Used.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Well, yeah, because they're selling the Kurt Cobain Jaguar for $1,200.
Exactly.
For what is mostly a Mexican-made guitar.
Yeah, for more or less Mexican-made.
That's a whole other conversation. The country of origin thing, but yeah, I mean, Squire, like, this is good stuff. They're taking note of what people are looking for, I guess.
They did. I think that these are going to sell well, and like I said, I hope they make a lot of these baritones, because I'm in.
I'd be interested. I'd like to play a Tornado again just to see what it's like. I don't really think that Fenders lend themselves very well to a 4-tone control arrangement.
That's the only thing.
I'm not a huge fan.
That's why I do like the Cabronita Telecaster thin line, because it's not trying to do the Chris Shiflett 4-tone, 4-volume 4-tone or 2-volume 2-tone thing. 4 controls.
I'm emoting right now.
Yeah.
Anyone who's played Fenders from the 90s, and you played their humbuckers in the 90s, they were awful.
But you can replace these with P90s and get yourself a
No.
Oh,
That's not what I'm saying. I think everybody who looks at these, is okay with it being a humbucker, but their humbuckers were bad, right? So like there was a time period when Fender was doing a lot of Seymour Duncan humbuckers in their guitars, and that was because the Fender standard humbucker was junk. These have what they call the Squire atomic humbucking pickups, and the funny part is the original pickups that were in these guitars were the atomic humbuckers, and they were bad. They were delightfully terrible.
Well, the two Telecasters are a P90 type thing.
Yeah, no. I'm talking about I'm talking about the
You're talking about Tornado.
The Tornado, and because that would be the one I would be most interested in.
Supersonic. Yeah.
You know what? I hope that these are better than the supersonic humbuckers of old. And this is funny because we talked about this the other day or whatever, a couple episodes ago when we were talking about the Lead 2, when they announced the re-release of the Lead 2 back in January or whatever it was, and how hilarious it was that they reissued the Lead 2 because those guitars were not good. Like, people didn't like those things.
No.
And then they re-released them, and like everybody wants one now.
Yeah. And it's that nostalgia factor, I think.
Well, nostalgia, and I think also like a lot of people saw them hanging in pawn shops and stuff, and they're like, I don't have the money for that, but I can buy a new one for like X whatever. And again, those didn't have great pickups in them, and it's like a whole thing. But hey, if you really want one, Fender's gonna offer it to you now. I want to see Fender do something new though. Like I want to see Fender take a shot at Ibanez, or make a Les Paul like guitar, with like a set neck, and I want to see him do something different, because we've seen him do the parts guitars. Like it's done and over with.
So the tellies that at least the two tellies are using the Fender designed Alnico soap bar single coil. So
basically P90.
It's their P90.
Yeah, because I can't say P90.
I'm interested. I'm in for the baritone. I think I'll probably pick one of those up.
Yeah, I'd like to see him start doing a 7-string again.
That would be interesting
because they've done it before.
Yeah, Gibson and Fender have done it. I'd like to see them kind of go back to that thing. The thing about the 7 strings for them, and I don't, we can't say this.
I actually think it makes less sense for Gibson, but for Fender, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Hasn't been their biggest sellers.
No, and I wouldn't expect them to do more than one model.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would do like a telly type thing with a 7-string, or maybe a Strat thing.
Or like, because they did the Showmaster, which was a Squire, right? And I think they also did a custom shop version of the Showmaster as well. And they were just a flat top like Strat guitar with like a arm contour and 7 strings. And I think they had Floyd on them. Just a simple like 7-string guitar aimed at metal players, and see what happens. Or do a heavy metal Strat with a 7th string, right? Like that would be
the HM Strat. Yeah,
I'd buy one. Yeah, Fender, if you do this, I promise you I will buy one. I think that would be a killer guitar.
The Carbonita baritone. They probably don't need to sell me one. They'll probably be gone before it gets tested.
They're not selling you a 7-string. I think we've covered this one. I don't think there's anything else we're more talking about. I want to make a lofty prediction about something.
Yeah. I had one more, but go ahead.
Okay, we'll go back to that. Finish yours. I can remember my lofty prediction.
All right. So the other thing that Fender has come out with is a new set of pedals. It's 3 pedals in this MTG series. We've got the MTG Tube Tremolo, the MTG Tube Distortion Pedal, and then the MTG LA Tube Distortion. These are 3 distortion pedals, or 2 distortion pedals and a tremolo pedal. $200, $199.99. Now, usually I would say this might be overpriced, but honestly, I'm going to make a prediction on these. I think they're going to be popular. I think they're going to do well. And that's only because the $200 distortion pedal is no longer expensive. And if what they're doing is they're saying, okay, you know what, we've got these tube distortion pedals that you can put in front of your non-distortion famous Fenders, like the Twin or the Deluxe or the
Yeah.
what's the little one, the Pro Junior and the Junior and the other one, the Pro or whatever it's called.
All right. So here's my issue with Fender making drive pedals and somehow them all being successful. And I'm gonna posit something that's gonna probably shock people. I think Fender, the only company that Fender's selling pedal, or the only people that Fender's target market for pedals are people who don't know any better at this point. I'm not saying their pedal line sucks. I'm saying that they're entering a very crowded marketplace by a lot of mom and pops who have a lot more exclusivity and a lot more street cred and trying to make a go of it. And they have a lot of financial backing. I wouldn't be surprised if they have not yet turned a profit with their pedal division. With these tube pedals, I have a feeling they're going to be targeting a higher price point, like you said. I haven't looked at pricing on them. And I have a feeling that this is being done as kind of a shot across the bow of like, look what we can do, towards with what some of the other companies can't do at this point, which is design a tube circuit that's quality. But that being said, if you had to ask me if I should buy one of these Fender tube sound distortion devices and give up my King of Tone or give up my, well, I guess I don't have anything else on here that's like not super boutique, but or my Kingmaker or my, Angry Driver or whatever other distortion unit I can get for, $200, like, I'm going to laugh at you and be like, no, okay. I don't care if it's tube or not.
Before you go too far, I'm going to give you one little thing that you should know about him. Bruce Egnater was behind the design.
Absolutely not. No way in hell would I buy these. No way in hell. So, Bruce wants to come on the show and set the record straight. I'm more than willing to do that. I've had it out with Bruce in a couple of Facebook groups at this point.
Yeah, I know.
I think Bruce, and I think I've talked about it on the show. I think Bruce is a good guy. I think Bruce has had a really tough time getting his products to market, and he will design consult for anybody. Because he wants to make licensing money. That's been a great way for him to make income. But if you've played his amps are not great. They're okay. And I think they actually sort of have a reputation for breaking down and not being that wonderful, which is why they're not super popular and why that whole thing didn't take off. The other thing is he makes the module system, right? That's licensed through Synergy. Synergy's expensive. It's woefully expensive when you think about what it costs, and actually the majority of the cost of the modules, I would suspect, is the licensing fees from people like Friedman and Morgan Amplification. Because realistically, what are we talking about in terms of parts for a preamp? We're talking tube sockets, $15. We're talking 12AX7 tubes, usually two. $20 there, $30 there, and then $5 worth of components. When you're talking about that, you're talking about a $50 item that they mark up, and it's like $400 for a module. So for him to go and do the Fender tube effects, they're actually not that expensive. So like I don't know if that's actually. So what are they calling these?
They're calling them the
MTG. Okay, and they're $200 even.
Yeah. And he's putting in a NOS 6205 preamp.
So I'd have to see the circuit before I could make this adjudication. But this has been a problem with preamp tubes before in pedals, which is that if you don't run them at the proper voltage, you're not going to get the effect you're looking for anyway. Which is something we talked about with Thomas Plug, and he was very upfront with, yeah, we are running at lower voltage, but we're running it at enough that it has an impact. And the lower voltage is to actually increase tube life and not so there was like a whole part of the conversation was that like it's there for a purpose, and we actually spec'd it out for that purpose to run at this voltage so it would last longer.
Right.
6205, I don't know anything about. I know it's a surplus tube. You can get them. They're not using a lot of stuff, so they're actually not terribly expensive. I don't know.
Yeah, so
I want to like these things, but they look big. Like that's another factor that's going to damage their credibility in the marketplace is the size of these pedals.
So if you look at the marine layer and the other ones that they've put out so far, they're all pretty much this standard size. They've pretty much come up with a size and said, okay, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, that's their chassis, right? Like they have a machine probably that they own that makes these, and then they put the boards in them and they powder coat them or laser etch them or whatever it is they do to get the color.
Yeah, because they've got
they look cool in person. I'll give you that.
Yeah, they do, and I gotta give Fender credit. The marine layer is really nice.
There are several other boxes that are actually really good sounding. I'm just saying, like from the perspective of coming into a marketplace where you're not the cool kid on the block in the pedal community. You're not,
right?
And you're gonna really have to scratch and claw to get there. Do you remember when Gibson started doing tube amps again? In the early 2000s?
Yeah.
Oh, they just got their clock cleaned because they walked into a world that they didn't understand.
They hadn't been there in too long.
Well, I think that was, old management, the way they thought about things. Everybody wants vintage tube amps. They reissued some of their vintage style designs, right? Instead of looking forward and saying, we really need to have something that's, that fills a modern hole in the line first. Then we can do the vintage line. But they didn't do that, which is funny because they went the complete opposite way with the modern guitar that they designed. That piece of trash, the Firebird X, which I don't even understand why they called it the Firebird. I mean, it didn't really even look like a Firebird, but anyway.
It didn't look like anything.
Yeah, it looked like a turd.
It
actually did too. Like you think about it more, the Fire Turd X. Like you think about it more, it does look like something that came from someone's rectum. I mean, it does. Yeah. It's disgusting, but it does. Nah, dude. Like maybe they'll make a go of these. They
might.
You do have who is a tube amp legend behind it. I would assume he knows enough to know that you got to give him proper gain staging and all that to make the tube work properly. I think the boxes look cool. I think they're a little big. I wonder, do they have like a direct out or anything, like any feature like that? That's
no. And I was kind of surprised because their acoustic overdrive pedal does have an onboard cab sim. So they did do where this kind of becomes your DI, and you can, give it a little drive and turn the drive off, and so on and so forth.
And we've talked about this on the show before, Jim. I have friends who do use Fenders to as a pedal platform. I think Fender amps make terrible pedal platforms, and that's just because I think that the way that they clip, and the way that if you run drive into them, you get a lot of I don't say sizzle, but like that ripped, the thing I was complaining about with the V30, the ripped paper sound at lower volumes. And you really want to keep that headroom. So it's always been difficult for me to manage, like, where do I set the volume? Where do I push my pedal through it? And I suppose if I'd lived with it and gigged with it, I probably would have kept my Princeton because I probably would have figured it out eventually. But I could not play it in my condo. It was way too loud for me to run pedals through it. It sounded like garbage. Like you had to run it at a decent clip to get good sounds out of it with pedals. So that's that's my unique hang up. I've had that problem consistently, so it's not like a knock against them. I do like their amps. I do think their amps are a bit harsher than some of the boutique stuff that you can get that's based off their designs, but I think that's because of Rojas compliancy. I think it's because of part selection. I think it's because of board design and some other things that they're impacting that. So they're good for what they are. And they're not expensive. I mean, even Deluxe Reverb now is what, like $1,100? It's not terrible.
Yeah.
you'd be hard pressed to find that kind of an amp design in the boutique world for anything close to 1100. I mean, in 1100, you're talking about a 5-watt like Dr. Z or something like that. So.
Yeah, it works for me. That's for damn sure. So there was something you wanted to say about you were going to make a prediction.
Yeah, I am going to make a prediction. But before we do that, I want to let everybody know we're about an hour and 20 minutes into the episode. I can give you the correct count on that here in just a moment. We are about an hour and 24 minutes into the episode, so we got time for a topic or two left. Just kind of touching base on something that we talked about for Winter NAMM. Obviously, before Winter NAMM, Ibanez came out with their headless bass. The Doulahan, I think it's Doulahan, is the Harley Benton model, the headless model. I think they shipped the first run. Now they've been making some modifications to the design. This is a thing with Harley Benton and Thomann. They like to manipulate things at the last minute. And so they're like, oh yeah, now we're going to do a run with, flame maple. And if you want to buy into this, it's an extra $50 or whatever. They're doing something similar to that right now. One of our show listeners is actually looking to get one, Patreon supporter, and guest of the show, Jason Fuzzmonger. He's looking at getting one. I think he's actually already ordered one, and he was trying to decide whether he wanted to move up. If you don't know the story behind the Doulahan or whatever, Kiesel found out about it early on. Somebody tipped him off in his group. He threatened to sue. And I've watched these guitars kind of slowly climb in price, and I wonder if that's because there's a lawsuit going on. It's been suggested by some people I know that Strandberg may also be suing them because the hardware on these guitars is like identical to Strandberg hardware, allegedly, and that they had some sort of patent on the hardware or something, and then of course they're producing these guitars at Cortec, right, the Strandberg guitars. And now there's kind of a question: is Cortec making the hardware for Strandberg, or is Cortec farming it out? And if they're farming it out in China, that would explain how this ended up on the Harley Bentons, because they're made by the same factories in China that are also producing the Chipsons and stuff at night. And so we know Bad Cat Guitars was producing a headless guitar that looks an awful lot like a Strandberg, using hardware that was very similar to a Strandberg. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're not adding features to the guitars and upping the prices more than the features added cost to cover their legal fees to fight this thing in court, which is what I'm thinking might be actually happening. But that's an aside. So we know the market is ready for an inexpensive headless guitar. Ibanez right now is the only one holding the pieces that could actually accomplish this. They've had a successful headless bass line. Like, a lot of people like them. I'm seeing them around in places on the internet, and I'm also talking to local stores, and they've had a couple of orders come through. It's a pretty popular guitar. And, of course, when we said, oh, look, there's a headless bass. Where's the headless guitar? Well, Winter NAMM was the Pia. Okay? And I'm kind of wondering, it's either going to be Summer NAMM, which there isn't a Summer NAMM this year, right? So it's going to be around this time, between now and August.
It'll be next week.
Between now and August, right? Because some companies I'm already hearing are spreading out their stuff so that their launches don't coincide with everybody else's launches, which kind of makes sense. And actually, if you think about it, this is even better for them because tax refunds. Since taxes were delayed until July this year, refunds can come in whenever, right? And so that means that people have some tax money right now. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Not me, I paid.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do. So that's not totally like the norm. But you know what? They do see a boost from that. So anyway, I think July, August, Ibanez announces the headlesses. And they're going to be headless guitars, kind of in the vein of Strandberg, somewhere between Strandberg and Kiesel. Ibanez style designs. You might see an RG and you might see an S. I think it's more likely you see a headless S, because that kind of fits the aesthetic more. Or if they take the bass design, they shorten the horn, they carve out the bottom a little bit, and they make it look like a guitar design, right? Nevertheless, I think we're going to see them. I think we're going to see them July, August, or we're going to see them at Winter NAMM this year. I don't think those are far behind. I think they got to strike while the iron's hot. Headless guitars go in and out of fashion like every 10, 15 years. So if they really want to make some money on this, they got to do it now. And Ibanez does not have a hot line right now. According to local retailers I've spoken with, and there's been more than one, Ibanez has not been selling real well the last couple of years. The last big product line launch they had was the Iron Label, which was huge. A lot of people bought Iron Labels like right off the bat, and then it just went, and there was nothing left. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them drop, a headless guitar here in the next couple of weeks. That's my prediction.
They've already tanked the Jiva.
Really?
Yep. They've already said it's not available.
Really?
That's right on their website.
That is shocking to me.
There are some in stock in places around.
Is the Jiva going to be headless?
They've already gotten rid of the Jiva.
Is that why? Yeah. Is that why though?
I don't know. They've introduced the Jiva X and the Jiva Junior.
Right, which I knew about the Jiva Junior, which that sort of makes sense, right?
Yeah, that was to bring in the cheaper version. I guess the Jiva X is the new Jiva 10.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. I would not be surprised to find out that the new standard Jiva is a headless. And it's an S series. Because I said that, like, that may be a thing. Like, she may have kind of prompted them, like, I've got a Strandberg and I don't play it on stage because I have an Ibanez endorsement, but...
Yeah, that's a possibility because they've already, like I said, they've already replaced the Jiva 10 with the Jiva X. So that's going to have to be something that...
She better get a new album out soon. Because I think her popularity is kind of starting to wane in terms of, her own, like, touring her own music and whatever. But I think it's more than likely you're going to see they're going to do it for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if Schecter doesn't do headless basses and guitars at the same time. ESP Ltd, they need to hit. I wouldn't be surprised if they're not waiting in the wings, with something. And if ESP Ltd does it, I think you're going to see three price points. I think you're going to see a $700 to $1,000. I think you're going to see $1,000 to $2,000, and I think you're going to see a high-end USA one for $3,000 plus. If Schecter does it, I think you're looking at $1,000 entry level, and I think a premium model at $3,000. I think the same thing with Ibanez. You're going to see a premium level guitar for about $700 to $1,000, with similar appointments, and then you're going to have the Prestige model, which will be like $2,500. To distinguish it from the AZ line, but also to make sure that, it's got specialized hardware and stuff on it. It's going to cost more. The only thing that terrifies me about buying an Ibanez headless is all of the hardware is going to be totally custom, and it's going to be an arm and a leg for replacement value. It's going to be insane. Your bridge on an Ibanez is going to be like a $200 bridge, for like a basic bridge. That's just how Ibanez rolls. I don't even think they went to the Goto 510, and it doesn't have parts congruency or something. Like, they want you to use Ibanez parts on their version of the Goto 510 for the AZ line. So that's a whole other can of worms. But this has been a really gear-centric podcast tonight.
Yeah.
I hope you like gear. So actually, I want to end this with an interesting discussion, and I want to talk about price points, and I want to talk about, like, I really want to delve into, like, beginner price point versus, like, intermediate price point. I'm not really concerned about high end because I think high end is like a huge category. I think, where do you think high end begins, and then we'll kind of work backwards? Because I think it begins around. I think it's around $2,000 myself
for guitars. Yeah, well, the problem is that there are people who think high end starts at $1,500.
No, and this is a totally subjective topic. I'm actually looking for people to send us hate mail and comment in the the YouTube comments in the Facebook group.
For me, I guess if I was to say that high end started at $2,000, then there's almost no such thing as a other than a high. I say a high end, a more rarely sought after Fender. There's nothing in the Fender category over $2,000. I mean, the ultras are under $2,000.
I don't think Fender Fender does have stuff over $2,000. It's custom shop.
Well, yeah, but it's custom shop stuff. And
that's my point.
Yeah.
Fender's high end is custom shop because their custom shop until you get to about $5,000 is not made to order.
Right.
It's production line.
No, it's production custom shop stuff.
Which is hilarious because it's not really custom shop. It's production made by a small group of people.
Right. But I mean, like they released the ultras in a special color, then it's over $2,000. Otherwise, it's under $2,000.
Yeah.
Something like that. Ibanez, I would say anything over 1,500. For Fender, I would say anything over 1,500. You get out of the second tier of American.
Yeah, I think average between 1,500 and 2,000 is where you're going to get into high end stuff. Like you're going to start getting into the premium features. You're talking
depending on the company, 1,500 to 2,000 is your high end stuff.
So like for example, PRS, anything like S2 is their working guy guitar, right? Like that's what
and that's $1,500. That's just under $1,500.
S2? No, they're about between 1,000 and 1,500.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're under 1,500.
Yeah. They're between 1,000 and 1,500. And then of course your high end stuff is $3,000. CEs are kind of in between.
The CEs are
I would consider those high end, but
yeah, they're in that 1999 category. The what's that company? Or I mean that company, yeah. The John Mayer is just over $2,000. I mean, it's high end, but it's not out of reach expensive for your average Joe that's got a little bit of expendable cash. And
they got a high credit limit,
getting their first high end guitar
or only high end guitar.
But it is. I mean, even the SG. I'm pointing at my SG for those who can't see me. My SG is not considered high end by some people because it's under $2,000.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm getting at. So let's say high end on average is $1,750, right? Let's say I want to say, and this is where I get into disputes with people. It's like, what's the purpose of intermediate? So like in between, I would say you have your entry level stuff, which I think goes all the way up to, and this is going to freak some people out, $500 for entry level now.
I would put it up more now. Yeah. I was about to say those Fenders we talked about earlier tonight, those are $400.
Yeah, those are $400.
I think they're all $400.
But they don't consider those entry level. Fender doesn't consider those entry level. They don't.
Yeah, one is $350.
Fender's idea of entry level ends at Affinity.
Yeah, and see, for me, I don't think those are. I mean, I suppose you could call them entry level.
I would consider them entry level. The Bullets are, the Bullets are pack guitars, right? I mean, and then the next step up is the Affinity. And then the Affinity is like for the guy that's got a little bit more money, sort of like, I'm going to learn guitar and like I'm going to stick with it, so I'll get the Affinity and I'll get a real amp.
That one's, let me see. Let me make sure, but I'm pretty sure the Affinity
about $200
is
200.
Yeah, over 200 now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over 200.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like
that's an entry level guitar.
We've done this on the show before. We've had this conversation about like when you start guitar, like what should you be paying for whatever. And I think we said 500 was like, you want to be under 500, but you don't want to be over 500 because you're going to be spending more money than you know what you want at this point. Right. And I still stick by that, but I would say like, I could definitely see people getting into guitar right now and dropping $1,000 on a guitar and amp right up front, or $500 on the guitar and $200 on the amp. Like getting a Marshall, whatever small combo thing.
You can get to used DSL for $500. You can get into a Fender. What's the one? The Pro Junior or the Junior, for $500. Give or take. In the used, we're talking used market now.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's assuming they want a tube amp. Like they can buy a Katana for $350. It's like,
Right, and you can get the Katana 2 for $350.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking is like, okay, so you go to the guitar store for the first time, and they're like, I need my first guitar, and like I've never played before, and like what would you recommend? And then they show you an Affinity, Tele, or Strat, and they say, do you like the Strat or the Tele better? And you say I like the Strat. Or they show you an Epiphone, which Epiphone's lines are under 500 basically. They've got several guitars available to you. An SG, a Les Paul, the basic stuff. They even have 335s that are around $500. Yeah. And you pick one out, and then they say, okay, so you need to get an amplifier and a cable, and a strap, and they're gonna take you through all those pieces, and you could be out of the store for around $800, pretty easily.
I can tell you right now. So I'll have a customer come in, and it's hard to get a customer in and out the door in, say, an entry-level acoustic under $300.
Yeah.
$300 or $400. And I'm talking about just the only thing I'm selling them. That's not trying to like, oh, you should buy the protection plan. You should buy this. I'm talking about the guitar, strap, and a bag, and possibly a tuner.
Dude, bags aren't $20 anymore. Like, I can remember buying bags that were really nice for like $25 when I bought a guitar and thinking that's outrageous. And now it's like, dude,
80.
like your entry-level bag is like $50.
Oh, yeah.
And it's basically just nylon with a zipper, like no
$50
padding.
to $80. If you want any padding at all, you're at $80.
Yep.
You're at $80. I don't care where you are, you're probably paying tax. So you're about $80. Now, if you buy a $200 guitar, an $80 bag, because you want some padding, because good gosh darn well, you're too cheap to buy the protection plan, right? So you should buy the protected bag then. So if you get out of there, so now you're at $280. Like I said, you're already at $280. You haven't bought a strap, and you haven't bought picks. You haven't bought strings if you want a set of strings on there. And you haven't bought anything else. A tuner. Now I recommend if you want to go inexpensive, use your phone. Most of us have a smartphone. Use your smartphone. Get the Fender or the Ibanez, tuner app. It's just as good. But if you want a headstock tuner, you're out $20 to $30.
Unless you get a Snark.
Yeah, well, that's $20.
Oh, I thought they were like $5.
No, you haven't bought a Snark in a while.
I don't buy Snarks; they're junk in my opinion. But
if you buy the ones that are $5, I don't think Snark makes them anymore. But the ones that are $5 that you can find
they're $12.
Yeah, the tuners that are $5 are total garbage.
Yeah, they're $12. Actually, I would, and this is why I don't run a music store, because I would stock the Peterson Strobo clip, and I would tell people when you're buying your first guitar, spend more money on a tuner, because it will make your life that much better.
I have a Peterson Strobo clip. I don't use it at home, believe it or not. I just use these. Yeah, I use these.
I use the strobe mode. I use the strobe mode on my Kemper down here.
Yeah, the strobe mode on my TU2. But I use these when I'm just sitting.
Yeah, the Snark.
Or the tuner in my I have a D'Addario tuner that's in the sound hole of my acoustic. And then I have the Peterson stays in the gig bag so that I know where it is and I don't forget it for a gig.
Nah, I got the TU3.
Well, the TU2 the TU3, I'm sorry, has strobe mode. So, and the TU2 did too. Those who have TU2s, you do have strobe mode.
I don't know anybody that actually uses it, but
yeah, if you went out to buy, let's say you were going out to buy for your first guitar, you said, I'm going to get a Paranormal, which is not an expensive guitar.
$400. You're an entry, right? According to you and I.
Let's say you said,
According to you and I, that's entry level.
Yeah, let's say that is an entry level guitar. That's not a lot of money. But now you don't get a gig bag. You don't get a case. So you're going to have to buy a case. And if you're buying, let's say you don't get anything wacky shaped, you get the Cabernita thin line.
Right.
So if you get one of those wacky shapes, Be prepared to spend some money on a case, guys. $100 minimum for a hard shell case.
Yeah.
If you're going with the gig bag, you're still $100. If you're going to get that baritone, be prepared to spend some extra money because you're going to need some extra length. Because that 3 extra inches is too long for,
Standard guitar case.
And,
yeah.
Be prepared to spend $30 or more for a decent strap, right? You may or may not buy strap locks. You can use the old rubber washer trick. I don't see any reason for that not working. I had one person that told me they can't use a rubber washer. I'm like, I'm surprised, because you could buy the Joe Bonamassa signature rubber washers are only $20. Yeah, see, he's got one right there, and that's for like a set of 20. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you can get them right on his site. Anyway, which is cheaper per washer than if you bought them from, the Fender ones and the Ernie Ball ones, which are still only a few dollars, for like a $5 package for 4. But anyway, so you've got those. Then you're gonna go. So you're out $500 now, and you're out maybe $30-$40 for a strap. And then you got to go buy an amp. And what are you going to buy? Are you going to get an entry level tube, or are you going to buy? And here's the thing that ticks me off. So a person will come in. I'm not going to say a guy, but a person will walk in the store and say, "Well, I'm going to buy the katana." Okay. Why are you buying the katana? I like to ask why you're buying the katana. I want to know. Well, it's got all these effects built in and blah blah blah. Okay. That's good. That's good decision. And then they go, okay, so now what guitar effect pedals should I buy? None are the ones you should buy, because you bought a katana and it's got the effects built in. There's a reason for that. It is not a good pedal platform. It's just not. And
I don't know. I had good success with pedals. In fact, I like the pedals external more than I like the ones in it.
You had the 100-watt katana.
Yeah.
So did I. I'm talking about the 50.
Well, even the 50, like, it's just a power.
I didn't think it was that good.
I think they're the same
I didn't
thing.
think it was that good.
I don't think the 50's that good, period. But
well, the 50's got the cheaper speaker. And
speaker, smaller cabinet, less features. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but for a starter, yeah. Interesting.
That's your $250. That's your $250 one. Right. So I mean, and I'm trying to go entry level here. That's why when they ask me, I say, well, you might want to step up to the 100 if you want to do that. Well, now I got to pay $100 extra for the guitar amp. Yeah, but you're going to get more features, and you're going to get a better, more full featured amplifier. You're going to like better for the longer term. I always love somebody who says, I'm spending, at this point, you're out $700.
Yeah, the 50 actually right now is $230.
Is it 230? There you go, 229.
Yeah,
so that's even better.
I don't know if that's because of the Gearfest sale, but I'm on Sweetwater's site looking. I was just on Musician's Friend a minute ago. I typed in starter, and I brought up the packs. It said starter.
Yeah,
and it shows you
starter
the packs.
Are terrible. I don't recommend them for anybody over the age of 10. I mean, I know people do it, but the starter packs are.
It's not a good way to get started. It really isn't.
No.
Spend a little bit more money on the guitar. You can compromise on the amp a little bit. Just plan on upgrading it eventually anyway. You're gonna want to do that. This is something we've covered before, so.
So yeah, I mean, I was throwing the 250 number out there because I couldn't remember exactly, but okay, 229. So you're out 230 plus 400 for a guitar. So you're out 630 plus the cost of a strap and a thing. So like I said, you're out $700 plus.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
All right. Retailer, right? You're working at a Guitar Center. Somebody comes in, you say, you're looking for a Telecaster. I'm really into, I don't know, some 70s guitar player who had a 50s Tele, right? And you're like, okay, this is the Tele for you. You pull out a Classic Vibe, which are what, 350-ish, right? 350, 400. And they're like, wow, that's really more than I was looking to spend. Do you get that? I mean, do you get that a lot?
Yep, I get that a lot.
And that's really what I'm honing in on this, right? Is this like shock factor? Oh my God.
And by the way, the classic vibe have gone up to $450.
Yeah, that's why I thought they'd gone up. That's why I said $350.
Yeah.
So this is the shock factor I'm talking about. So imagine you're a guitar player that bought a guitar in 2006. You've been playing your starter guitar for 7 or 8 years. You got serious about it recently, and you've been playing a lot during COVID-19. You come out, you go to the guitar store, you say, I'm ready to get my intermediate guitar, and you know what you want. You've already got your idea, and then you look and you realize, oh my gosh, it's like $900 for my intermediate guitar.
Yep.
Could you imagine the panic? Like, we've had people in the group lambaste me because, and I'm not looking to start fights or pick fights. I'm just pointing this out. There's nothing wrong with playing a beginner guitar on stage. Like, I've done it. I'm sure everybody in the group has done it at some point if you've been on stage. I've recorded guitars that are far cheaper than what I play regularly. And I think that's okay. I'm not telling people like you shouldn't do that. But let's say you do need the features, like you're not going to get a Floyd Rose equipped guitar for $400.
Well, you will, but
yeah, unless you buy used. I mean, that's a hard. So Ibanez makes the one RG that comes with the Floyd for like
and there's a
400
whole
even.
lot of dinkies from Jackson.
Oh yeah. So yeah,
I'm
okay.
just saying.
All right. So there is a guitar for you, right? Which that guitar doesn't make sense to me. So I'll explain why. The last thing a beginner wants to do is dick with a Floyd Rose. Here you go.
Every time a kid comes in with their mom and they say,
I want a Floyd. That looks really cool. And you're like, no, you don't want a Floyd.
Have you ever played guitar? No, this is not the guitar for you. Are you because you don't seem like a patient child. I mean, I don't say that out loud, but that is what's going through my mind. Is that you've got to try to play to their strengths, not their weaknesses.
Yeah, well, my girls, so both of them have guitars. One of them has she has like the cut down RG GR Micro, right? And then the other one has an Ibanez hollow body jazz box, one of the Arc Cores, and it has like the big Maestro tailpiece on it, and I don't think she can restring it even now. Like, I have to help her restring it when she has to restring it. And that's so like that's a challenge. Could you imagine what getting a Floyd Rose as your first guitar would be like?
Or a Bigsby?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same concept. I mean, it's just what are you thinking? And it's going to be bad for your intonation, all that. But so like my point is, I just talk about the shock factor, right? Like somebody goes in and they have their heart set on something, and then they realize like, okay, so to get a guitar that I feel comfortable playing on stage, that's not going to have problems like intonation or loose frets, and it's going to have an even neck, and it's going to, it's going to have all the boxes checked. It's going to look nice. It's going to have, that there's not going to be any like problems with the neck pocket if it's a bolt-on, or basically just like a solid guitar, right? And you tell them $700 to $1,000.
That's right. So let's say they come in and they say just what you just said, and again, let's stick with the simple one. Let's stick with the Telecaster. Although the Strats and the stuff is going to be in the same ballpark.
I think a Telecaster is a perfect example because it's bone simple.
Bone simple. $700. I'm going to tell them classic, or I mean a Fender Player series all day long.
Yep.
It's Fender Player. You can, because 2 reasons, and I recommend this one for 2 solid reasons. If you're going to want to change the pickups ever in the future, you haven't really blown the value of a Fender Player. You can take the pickups out and either keep the old ones and put them back in, or just get new ones. Either way, you're fine. The other reason is it's tank. Built like a tank. Fender Player series are great. Just great guitars. So for the money, probably one of the best deals between $600 The Fender Player Telecaster plus top maple right now is $600.
Yeah, of major label guitars, and that's
it was $724, so that's on sale. Normally around $700. So I would do that. I would get a Fender Player Series all day long.
Yeah. So that's the crazy part. So everybody who's gigged with a Mexican Strat, standard Strat, maybe before they went from the $350 to the $500 price point, your guitar now is a $700 guitar in Fender's line. So just put that in perspective. That's the cost of living increase, all right? That's what the inflation rate has done to the guitar market in 20 years. It went from $350 in 2004, right, around when I was playing, to $500 for about 7 or 8 years, and now we're at, what, $700, I think?
Yeah, if you were selling a made in Mexico standard Strat right now on the used market, you're in easily $400 plus territory.
Which is what's funny to me is because, like, most of them that I've seen are from the early 2000s and were purchased for $350. So they're making money on that deal.
That's right. I mean, you're not really, because of the inflation.
Right.
I think if you did the inflation on it, you're right at where inflation is. But it's funny because, you know, a guitar, think about it, my age. I graduated high school in 1982, right? So a guitar bought in 1982, for me, now, if I paid $500 for a guitar, for it to have actually maintained its value against inflation, it would have to go for $1,200 now.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at older guitars and you start thinking, oh, is it really that much more expensive? You've got to account for inflation in your overall look at, have guitars really grown that much? Not really.
See, I wonder, like, we base the inflation statistics on federal government numbers.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if they're not accounting for some things like, you know, the Medical Reform Act that came out under Obama. I wonder if those things drove the cost of living up so much because the employer passed that back on to the employee. And, like, so there's this artificial inflation that's not reported as inflation because it's not really the value of a dollar going up. It's the dollar being worth less. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of wonder. So this is the mind-boggling thing for me, right? People complained about Gibson Les Paul prices being what they are versus back in the day when they were, you know, $300 or whatever in the 60s. And I always thought that was just inflation, right? And, like, some people have done the calculations, so this is basically inflation. But what's crazy to me is we've had that $350 to $700 jump, which I want to be sure that they're actually $700, so I'm going to look it up. In the last...
I can tell you this. The inflation calculator, just the basic inflation, $350. This is the actual U.S. Bureau of Labor that I'm using. I'm not using some .com thing. Make sure you use a .gov when you're doing this stuff. All right, folks. You do not want an active web page on your computer that's using .com unless you know it. Anyway, the one we use at work to do our accounting, in January of 2000, if you bought a $350 item, today it's worth $531.62. That same dollar.
So what was that? What was the number again? I'm looking for the pricing on these.
The $350 that you spent then is now $531.62.
Yeah. So that's why I think is weird is, like, I think everybody sort of what was the time period shift there from 19 what to
from January 2000 to now.
So where's the other $300?
Well, they've gone up to $700, right?
Well, yeah, but that's not $500.
That's ahead of inflation. I know.
That's what I'm saying. That's
Right.
odd.
If I took that same number, let's say you bought that guitar in 95, it's $597. So again, it's ahead of inflation, but you got to remember the guitar is going to sit at that price for years. People won't. When did they finally increase the price of the player series? Because that was relatively recently.
Oh, so Monkey Wrench in the works.
Yep.
I'm looking for the actual, just like regular old Stratocaster though. I'm seeing like $899. Yeah. The cheapest player I'm seeing is a Floyd Rose at $799.
The cheapest Fender player I'm looking at right now is $699.
Okay, so I don't have a good search then. Hang on.
I'm at Guitar Center.
Yeah,
I just put
$699.
Fender player.
Yeah, $699. Okay. Which that's what I thought it would be, right? So it's $700.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've built in so they don't have to change the price over a couple of years, but they're also going to profit while that's going on. They're getting $200 extra for every play strat. So here's where like this disjoint happens for me. I'm okay with them making a profit. Like I don't care about that. Obviously they're going to say we upped the quality level of the guitar, and that's why it's not, that's going to be the cop out there. So my experience with the player series has not been a positive one. I played several of them at this point, probably 5 or 6. And of them, only one stuck it out in my mind as being okay. But that doesn't mean that there aren't good ones in the line. And I'm sure people will be happy with them. I don't know how much of that is factory setup versus,
well, again, we're talking to an intermediate player, right? We're talking about somebody who wants to get one. I have played the black one with the maple fretboard. It's the player series, and
so
it's a limited edition. We've had it on sale several times for $500.
So what I'm actually talking about playability wise, I'm talking about like sharp fret ends and stuff on a $700 guitar. It's ridiculous. But anyway,
yeah. I didn't experience that. I'm not saying that's really the only one that I've ever played, because it's the only one that interests me when I've played it, because it's kind of got that Dave Gilmour vibe to it. And every time I've asked somebody, what are you looking for? They're either looking for Hendrix or Gilmour. So if they tell me Gilmour, I point them to that one. And that one's been very popular. It's been very popular, and it's well liked. As far as sharp fret ends, that is something that I don't think nowadays. I don't think anything over $500 should have a sharp fret end.
No, and it just has to do with. So I played those at Guitar Center, the ones that I've noticed that have like really sharp fret ends, and I think it just has to do with the environment not being humidified. But that's pathetic.
Yep.
Like, get some humidifiers in there. You can't sell guitars like that. People aren't going to buy them, and if they do, it's because they are a beginner who has intermediate money, and they walk out with the Fender because they don't want the Squire because somebody told them Squire's terrible because they're living in the 80s.
Yep.
I don't know. It's just
that
like
classic vibe is probably just as good.
I'm just saying that it's just misleading, meaning misleading in the sense that I think people have this idea, and we've talked about in this group, where like, gigging guitar, I'd pay about $150 for basic gigging guitar, and I still agree with that. I still stand by that. But I'm not going to crucify anyone for buying $1,000 or $1,500 guitar, even if it's like a Telecaster at that point, because what do you get? I mean, what is the differentiator? Okay, so you get premium woods, usually something like that's a higher cut of wood or a better cut of wood. That's why you see more translucent finishes. In addition to the fact that translucent finishes they themselves cost they cost more, and often more attention to detail, just in the setup, fit, and finish. And then maybe even more attention to detail in terms of picking the wood for resonance and those kinds of things. And I think, to get into the really nice stuff, you're going to be looking at above 1,500. But I just, like, for me, somebody asks me, I've been playing guitar 5 years and just joined a band, and I don't feel like I have a great guitar for playing in this band. I'm steering them towards $1,000. Like, it used to be, and then we talked about on the show, like, if you've never gigged before and you're going to play a couple gigs with a band and you don't really, like, you've never done it before, don't blow your money on $1,000 guitar, because you don't know if you're going to keep doing it. You know what I mean? But it's a tool, and this is the thing I told my wife the other day in the car. We were having a similar conversation regarding some things that were said at GearFest, and some of the, and actually I'll circle back down to that when I get done with my thing here. But I think it's a tool. I think people that pretend that, you know, you're going to get away with a $500 tool, right? I can buy tools to do my flooring or paint the walls or do work on my engine at Harbor Freight, and I get the job done, but my wrist might hurt afterwards, or it might take longer, and maybe the tool is only good for like 3 or 4 jobs before it breaks. I've had good luck with Harbor Freight tools, so I know I'm picking on them, but I think we sort of know, like, when you buy from Harbor Freight, you're not buying DeWalt, you're not buying Milwaukee, you're not buying one of the big brands that everybody likes and that the professionals want to use. You're not buying Snap-on, you know. So, you know, whether you align yourself to those brands is irrelevant at this point. I'm just throwing out tool brand names that people know, right? Craftsman.
I'm a DeWalt guy.
Yeah, I'm a Milwaukee guy myself, but so when you stop and you kind of back up from that, and you look at that in perspective, and you say, okay, so I'm sitting here. I have a G&L S500. It's about a $1,500 guitar, and then next to that's a Godin LGP90. Like, to put this firmly in perspective, that's a $350 guitar, and I like them both equally. I think that pretty much tells you, like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna gig that LG P90, right? It was originally a $500 guitar, but I'm gonna gig it. I'm gonna take it out and I'm gonna play it at shows, it just as much as I will the S500. And the whole point is that, like, yeah, you can get tools for less money, especially if you buy used. They can fit the needs of a particular project. That P90 guitar is not going to do everything I ever want it to do, but it will do the things I need it to do. For some of the things I have very specific needs for. I actually use it as a country guitar, believe it or not. Yeah, so I, like, don't limit yourself, obviously, but if you're going to ask me, like, hey, do you think this guitar is enough? And I know you're going to be gigging regularly and stuff. I'm going to tell you, it's not, you know, if it's like a $700 guitar, you better be damn sure it's going to do exactly what you need it to do, and it better have a good reputation and good pedigree. I do think that I value things like resale value a little bit more than most folks, which is kind of silly. You shouldn't be buying guitars to sell them, but it does enter my mind when I think about it. I know a lot of people don't. People who buy Schecters, for example, like, are not often thinking about resale value, because Schecters don't have great resale value. They're okay. They're not bad. It's not Washburn, okay? Which, if you looked at Washburn's resale values, it's like, oh, Dean is actually the worst, though. Dean has the worst resale value, unless you get to the really high-end stuff, like the old Dean MLs and that kind of thing. But so circle back around. So how much money should you spend? We've been riffing on that for 20 minutes now. Here's the be-all, end-all. So we started this show, Practical Guitars, practical being a play on the word practice, but also being, you know, people who are doing things that are sensible, right? I watched the GearFest coverage. I watched a lot of the producer stuff. And this is something, Jim, you haven't watched all this footage, but as you're watching it over the next week, we can talk more about this next episode too, but watch some of the producer stuff, right? And what you're going to see is a lot of these guys are not like household names. They're professionals in the industry. They really are professionals. Many of them won Grammys, but they're winning technical Grammys. So you don't really know who these folks are until they, you know, tell you, oh, they did this, this, and this. But they're living very modestly. You can tell their homes are not expensive. They're not living in Beverly Hills. They're living just like you and me, you know, reasonable priced housing. They drive a Civic, you know, or thereabouts, like everyman car. And then you go into their studio, their home studio, and they have like a $2,000 synthesizer next to a $3,000 synthesizer hooked up to a very expensive Mac with, a $500 MIDI controller in front of them, racks filled with effects and, Neve preamps and stuff like that. $20,000 worth of stuff in each rack. And then they've got a 5.1 surround setup for their monitors that includes, PMC monitors and, all kinds of really expensive monitor gear, all passive with an actual outboard amplifier. And you're kind of wondering, like, this guy drives a Civic. And that's when it dawns on you. When you're into music, if you're a practicing musician, meaning like somebody who makes like a practicing lawyer in the same sense as a practicing lawyer or practicing doctor, you have one option, and that is to spend money on your tools. Right? That's where your money goes. You're not... Health insurance is secondary because you have to pay the bills, right? Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, to pay your mortgage to house all this stuff is another bill. It's like your priorities are very different than the guy that's like literally depending on his living for this. So when you watch the GearFest coverage and you see these people talking about, you got to have this and you got to have this, remember, these people are beyond commitment at this point. They are way past the point of no return. And I'm not advocating everybody get to the point of no return, but I think if you really want to have longevity in this business, like, you really have to do what Danny Raven was telling us, which is commit. And by commit, I mean, literally put yourself in an institution or a poorhouse, because it's like one of the guys, he's a film composer, right? Like legit film composer, and he shows the score he wrote, and he goes through each piece of it. And actually, I thought this session was not that great, but then he did a question and answer at the end, and I think it kind of like flipped the script on a little bit.
That's where you hit it, yeah.
Yeah, so he shows this film score, and he walks you through all the pieces, and it's like, I'm not quite getting the workflow of how the film scoring world works, right? And then I start to get it towards the end, because I realize, like, he's demoing the film score. And then he's going to turn around and he's going to take this demo and he's going to have real musicians perform it, and then they're going to record to his original project track. And then he's going to make the deliverable out of the project track, which it would be a two-stage process. You're not going to hire musicians until you have a finished score that you can actually show the studio, right? Or the director, or whoever's in charge of that. I would assume it would be producer, director, studio, right? So he has to have these tools. This is not something that, like, the studio is going to provide for him. Maybe he gets an allowance for a project. They say, okay, so we want you to mock this up for us. Here's $3,000 for your time for doing the mock-up.
Yeah, but that's for your time.
Yeah, that's for you to, like, use to pay your bills for the 2 or 3 days that it takes you to mock all this up. And if you don't have work every month...
Yeah, and what people don't appreciate out of that is you've got to live on that possibly for a month, possibly for 2 months. You've got to live on that, whatever that number is. I'm not going to say you can live on $3,000 for 2 months, but you've got to fly out. They're not going to pay for all that stuff separately. Here is your contractor money. Here's $25,000 or whatever.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine writing a film score in like 3 days?
Yeah.
That's what these guys are doing.
Yeah.
And then they're taking the film score, and it may not be complete, but they take it to the studio and they say, this is what I'm going for. And then the studio hears 3 of them. And then they go, we're using you. And the other 2 guys still get their cash advance, but they don't get anything else after that.
Right.
Whereas the other guy's going to get royalties and a whole deal, and he might get an advance to live on while he's, producing the master work that's going to go on the movie. But that's my point. Yeah, you're gambling. And
they'll get, I can't remember what the thing is. It's called Snap or Connect or something like that, so that every time they show that piece, he gets a little piece of that, or she gets a little piece of that.
But you and I, Jim, we couldn't do that. We couldn't just forsake everything and go off and be a musician like that. It's just not how it works. You have to get to that place. And I think that's, sort of what being a practical guitarist, in the sense that actually being practical means, is that you have to like build up this like momentum to get there, and you might spend your whole life doing it and never actually do it. Like it's that kind of thing. You'll have a lot of fun. I mean, I would consider myself right now, like I consider myself a pro-am, which is that I have a professional attitude. I have professional playing, but my business sense is amateur, you know, and that like, I don't really have aspirations to be a professional, in the sense that I don't want to be famous. I don't want to do any of that kind of horse crap. I really actually don't want to be famous. The level of fame we have with the podcast right now, I'm comfortable with. If it gets to the point where it's like people stopping on the street going, I know you, I'm going to be like, we ain't doing this shit. To an extent, like obviously, as long as people are friendly, but you know, if I know you and I'm going to hit you, like then it's, maybe I should rethink this. I think anybody who's listening to this podcast can probably relate to that. Nobody wants to be, you know, have violence inflicted upon them because of something they've said.
Right.
Especially if it's in comedy, because much of our stuff on our show is purely comedy. I just thought it was interesting watching GearFest and watching this footage and realizing that these people are fully committed. They are risking everything every time they do something. And they have, you know, like I said, home studio setup that is worth almost as much as their house, you know, in some cases. And it's a very, like, it's a frightening prospect to think, like, if you want to have, and it's dangerous, right? You watch this and you go, well, shit, I want that sound. And you sit there and you do the same thing, right? You're like, oh, well, I have to have that gear. And that gear is like a Neve preamp or something that's like $4,000 for one mic input. Be careful. You know, don't build yourself up with the idea that you need these things. And when we talk about high-end guitar and stuff, like, you don't necessarily need that. If you're really looking for a quality instrument, that's a good place to start. But don't oversell yourself, you know? And that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
I think you can relate to that. I mean, cool.
Yeah.
I just like awkward silences, so.
No, I like the way you brought it back around. So, just to let everybody know, I actually have ordered a Positive Grid Spark.
Yeah, it'll show up eventually, someday.
We're not holding our breath. It's not gonna happen. So we'll see how long that takes. What I didn't, I've talked about how they crowdfunded, and I'm still okay with whether they're doing it, but I've been charged, so I better get a product. But anyway, so what I didn't like about what they did was I saw they had a countdown type thing, because each one of the tiers of pricing has a close date when they closed it off. They said,
yeah,
we have, and
it's a scam, isn't it?
Each one of the tiers of the pricing has closed off. So I saw that they closed off the highest price already for this next order. They shut it down. They said, okay, if you bought the amp, the bag, and the headphones, that's it. There's no more. So I bought the amp and the bag. I went to mid-tier.
You don't need headphones anyway. You got nice ones already.
No, I don't care about that. So I went to the thing. Yeah, I've got these JBL Studios. So anyway, I went to the thing, and it said this X number. And so I said, okay. And if you look at my post and you look at the number now, they've added like 400 more, 300 more, something like that you can order. And I was like, you sons of bitches. I thought to myself, you have got to be kidding me. So you have extended. I thought it was running out. That's the reason I ordered it then. I thought, okay, if I'm going to get in at this price before they go sticking them in stores and the price almost doubles, I better order it now. I figured, okay, I'm going to get it before it's sitting on a store shelf and it's $400.
They're never going to double that price either.
I wouldn't be surprised once they get the stores involved that the price got to go up. But anyway, that's just my take on it. So I order it with the bag, and I see that, and then the freaking number keeps increasing, so that the number always looks like there's only about 80 more left to get. That's their trick. That's their play to get you to order it.
It's a scam.
It's not a scam, but it is certainly not very.
No, it is a scam because they're misleading the amount of
misleading.
Misleading is a scam. It's like an old bait and switch. Oh, we only have so many of these left, except that we're not really telling you how many we have left. That's unscrupulous as hell. If you really think about that, that's a grift and a half.
But if you look at their numbers, it's impressive. You're looking at the mid tier right now is in the 32,000 plus pre-order, and the lower tier, just the amp, is similar, just a little more, like 35,000.
If it's accurate,
they are selling a lot.
If it's accurate.
If it's accurate, exactly.
Because now we already know that they're playing games with the other number. It wouldn't shock me if they're playing games with that one too. However, given the price of the amplifier, 32,000 units wouldn't surprise me. It actually wouldn't.
34,794 at the 224 mark.
And this is not the first run.
No, and that doesn't include the other runs. And 13,931 at the thing. I think I came up with 70-something thousand when I added all the runs together, and that was on that day. So that's a lot. But they did stop at 4,200 with the headphones, probably because they couldn't get their hands on any more than 4,200 headphones.
Well, I want to see.
But you're looking at this current tier. Adding all the numbers together, you're up over 50,000 units.
Just looking on, I was looking to see
currently ordered.
So here's the problem I have with this, and I'm not saying that's an inaccurate or accurate number, but you know. I'm trying to pull up something so I can not talk out my rear end. There is precisely one for sale on Reverb. Used. One.
Yeah.
If they sell 34,000 units in the mid-tier run, I find that highly unlikely that they have sold 90,000 or whatever. That there's only one. Because I would suspect that an amp like a Deluxe Reverb doesn't do those kind of numbers in a year. And we know that's a popular amp. Blues Junior might.
Think about the number that they've actually delivered, though.
That's what I'm saying. Something there does not. The Katana doesn't have numbers like that. I mean,
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how many the Katana sells.
Somebody
I imagine they're pretty high.
Told me, and I don't think it was the rep from. Boss, but it was somebody else told me that they had heard the number, and they are in the industry, and I don't want to reveal names. And that was 2 years ago. I mean, I suppose they could have hit 30,000 units a year numbers now. But that's my point. They're saying one run is going to have 34,000 units in it. I find that almost unfathomable for Guitar Gear. I really do. Because that's an insane number. I think they're playing games with that. Maybe it's 15,000 units and head and bag. They're counting us as two orders.
The Spark guitar amp alone, 34,794 orders.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Then the head and a bag is 13,931, and then out of now 14,000 expected.
So how many
And
runs?
then 4,200.
How many runs have they
for
done?
the-
How many runs have they done already?
And they've done, this is the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe that's at 5. This is the 5th run. So the first
So
run only had
150
100 of each.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So 100 at each tier. So that's 300. That makes sense. The
Yeah.
second run had 250 of each. So now you're up over 1,000 because you're at 250 each, three tiers, 750. The third run had 6,000 of the normal practice amp. These are all the ones that are closed, so they've made these numbers. 2,000 of the mid tier, and 1,000 of the one with headphones, which is 9,000 plus the other 1,000. Now you're over 10,000. Third run. Fourth run, those are all closed runs. Fourth run, also closed. 7,500 plus 3,300 plus 1,000. So now you're at 1080 plus 1,000, so 11,080 plus the other whatever 1,000 that I came up with. So now you're over what 14 or 15,000, whatever.
I lost count at this point.
And then and now in the current run, you're at 34,794 the basic amp, 14,931 of the amp with the bag, and 4,200 of the now of course I don't think any of these have actually shipped, but you're looking at 34,000, so let's say 35,000 plus because it's 34,794, so it's close enough, plus 13,931, so close enough to 14,000. That's 50,000 plus 4,200. That's 54,000 units in this current run. That's a popular amp.
If that, I mean, right. If those numbers are real, and they probably are, actually putting it with that kind of ramp up makes sense to me. I kind of wonder if.
And they've got the running total at the top. It says join the 74,535 players who have already purchased a Spark. That's including the pre-orders that have not shipped yet.
There's something about that. Well, right, and it's probably the vast majority are in other pre-orders that haven't received theirs yet. Because if there were more of them in existence, I know people who buy things to try it out and then flip it on Reverb. And that's why I was like, if there's only one on Reverb, that sounds like this is BS. Those numbers are BS. But then when you put it in perspective, it's like, well, they've only shipped a couple thousand at this point.
Yeah, if they've only shipped 10,000 of them.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I could legitimate because it's a entry level product, right? It's like a beginner thing, or it's like a very specific niche product. People are not going to look at that as high value. I can sell it on eBay or Reverb. If you don't believe me, go look and see how many used Black Star flies you're going to find. It's actually not as many as you'd think would be sold. So it put it in perspective. But we're way over our time, Jim. So I'm going to take us out. I've been David.
All right. I'm a Jim.
And tonight we have been Practical Guitarists who ramble.